the clips. But yeah, so a couple of those videos, what I did was a couple of like 60,000 views. One was like 60,000 or something, but that was for the book, and it was it was like a paid promotion. And what's funny is to get views in the U.S. it like costs legit money, and in Canada it costs legit money. But places like India, you're like, oh, we'll show it to 1,000 people for like 10 cents. Okay, but nobody's going to buy the book, and so I had to learn what works and what doesn't work. You know, there's some.
I came prepared today, so.
Oh, nice, nice.
I haven't read it all the way through, but I need to.
Yeah, I think life just gets so hectic.
It does.
And so, because I have ambitions of books that I want to get through, and I just keep getting them, and I haven't read them.
Oh, you're like acquiring them, but not actually having enough time to get through them all?
Like in our Yukon days, I was doing Audible, and going into Yukon, and that first semester where we didn't really do anything at Yukon, you just like get involved and follow people around, whatever. I was getting through like 3 books a week, and you put it on like 1.5 double speed, and I'm doing like 3 books a week, and then things start to pick up, and you're just more and more busy, and I was buying books at the same rate, but I wasn't getting through with them. And I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I have like 42 books in my Audible account that I haven't actually started, because I just kept purchasing. And it's what I think like aquatic athletes, the Michael Phelps of the world and stuff, when they're swimming, they're burning 5,000 calories in exercise every day, and then they stop swimming. It's like hard to find a pool. And I think they're probably just going to keep eating the same number of calories that they were before. And so often you'll see swimmers gaining some weight after their athletic days of just that imbalance of caloric input and expense. And it was the same thing with me in Audible. It's sort of book consumption where I just kept putting them in there and just buying them. And then I realized after some weeks, like, I'm not actually starting any of these because I'm doing I'm just too busy. Yeah, and so I think, that you...
Did you subscribe to Audible, or were you buying them at that point? Did they have a subscription model at that point?
Yeah. So I've always had that. I mean, forever. I've had that like $15 a month thing. You get the 1 credit.
Yeah.
But then whenever deals come up, I'm like, ooh, that one's in my wish list. That one's in my wish list. I can get it for $5. And so I was just buying all my wish list items. I have this wish list of like hundreds of books. And whenever they'd go on sale, I'd buy them up. And that was fine when I was reading them.
Right.
And then I got to the point that I'm like, I put my Audible, every couple of years or every year, a year and whatever it is, you can freeze your Audible account. And I've been just freezing it like every interval that it's permitted. I just keep freezing it.
It's interesting because I've been doing the same thing since we connected at ACSM San Diego a couple years back.
Yeah.
I started thinking about like your perspective on podcasts, and obviously we're recording a podcast right now, but I just started thinking about, I was like, man, like Courtney's actually kind of right. Like, how many times are you on a podcast where there's no real, like, people are just talking in circles and they're not actually getting to the core message? The thing I will say is listening to an audiobook. Sometimes I like to listen and then buy the paper copy sometimes of the book in front of me.
I do that too.
So and then Ryan Holiday, I don't know if you know Ryan Holiday is an author. He does Daily Stoic podcast, but he like worked for Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power, and he came up with this idea because I was like, how come I'm reading these books, or I'm listening to them on this one, or I'm doing this one on Kindle because it's free through the library, but how come like after like 6-8 months I just can't remember? We've had this conversation in the past before, and I'm like, he had an idea that I thought was really neat. Of how he like took notes, because he had to read a ton of books to help give the notes so Robert Greene can. And he basically did scrapbooking kind of an idea where he bought 5x7 index cards, and as he's reading the book, if he's not owning it, or he's got to give it back to the library, but extract the things like, oh, that's a really important quote, or that's a really important concept, and then out of all the books that he reads, he puts them into a category, into these little binders, like scrapbooking kind of a thing. Yeah. And it becomes like an externalization of it's an externalization of all the books and information he's ever read. So instead of going back and rereading the book, he just got this personal finance or self-help or nutrition, or
Right.
and he's got a stack of note cards from all these books that were about a certain topic.
Like
I
his
thought that
own version of a Dewey Decimal System of how he's going
right,
to find the information he's because we all remember where information is, but remembering the sentence, remembering the quotation, remembering the name of the whatever
yeah,
it is, from politician to scientist to what, and the details, sometimes those are hazy, but knowing that there's a story, that there's a fact here,
right,
and like and where it's located. We all know where to find the phone number for
right.
but we don't necessarily remember the phone number itself. And I think it's the same thing with a lot of, whether it's science, whether it's socio-political information,
Right.
self-help, economics, whatever it is. I think we remember that there's information and where to retrieve it. But if we just need some sort of like Dewey Decimal System to be able to get to it.
I think that's right, and I think from the perspective of like physiologists in particular, people that like exercise physiology or just medical physiology, is to me, I would presume that this is the case with you as well. Is my experience of being your friend has known this, is that you really enjoy, and I do this too. It's nice to know the little factoids, the little random access memory, right? That is you could
Right.
pull, but that's not really. It's like I feel like a lot of folks, you and me being two of them, enjoy teaching physiology because we enjoy telling the story, right? Of telling the story of how to like fat. Oh, I heard that fat is the best thing that you should use for fuel source, right? That's the newest thing, right? And it's like, okay, well, forget what the Instagram follower says for just a second. Let's take a step back and let's think about why that could have some application and make sense, right? And to understand that, I just wrapped up exercise physiology this fall. Is all the systems and everything absolutely interconnect, and it the same way. Like it blows my mind how so much of what I'm now learning in like the business program and the MBA program, I'm like, oh, that's a negative feedback loop that they're just building. Like it's like that's science, right? And it helps me learn stuff.
Yeah, if we want business, if we want technology, if we want anything to work, model
Yeah.
it after evolution. Evolution has been working since the dawn of species, and it's succeeded. You know,
Right.
as evidenced by what's walking around and flying around and swimming around today, there were some victories there, and what's rooted and growing. And so if we can model our inventions, I mean, whether it's sanitary service, you know, the garbage trucks and everything and how those operate, I think we could probably do those better if we try to model it after how a body does it. I mean, just, you know, pick the immune system, pick circulation, pick whatever it is, and we can come up with inventions for transportation, inventions for you know, economic equality. So if you just do it like the body does,
Right. It's great. It's unbelievable.
yeah,
Even electricity. Electricity, it's basically a nervous system. It has like the same kind of like, right? Like you sit there and you're like, you start seeing these things. Okay, like, well, why does like, you know, heart rate speed up? Well, because you're taking fluid out of the system, right? So,
Right.
so it's like, you know, it's like, yeah, you're exercising, you're sweating, so it's going to make the blood thicker, and then that affects the blood pressure equation, and that affects the heart rate and sympathetic response equation. That shifts the VO2 curve, that shifts the lactate curve. You know, like so it's like it's this this homeostatic mechanism that we as human beings are. For being as robust as human beings are, like we can take on a lot of stuff, we're also like super sensitive beings. My
I'm
goodness.
sure we'll get more into that. Yeah, I mean, that's really the topic of the 21st century. But I do think allocation of resources, what biology does with that, you know, trees share and our organs share, and all, and what is a flaw in the system of sharing? Well, cancer would be a good flaw in the system, and that usually does a body in, untreated, right? It does a body in. And so when we see the same thing in a country, Okay, pretty quickly, if it's in the US, we become like a third world country. When we see, I mean, have you watched those wealth of, the top 10 wealthiest people or something, and watched those charts move year by year? And, where Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and fill in the blank, and what their wealth was. And even like Bill Gates, it's like he wasn't even active or anything, and his wealth got crazy. And he's just like, yeah, that's, you're like retired, and your wealth is increasing to this extraordinary rate. Like he's not the richest one, right? But his wealth, the systems in place are not devised like a human body. It's basically devised like cancer. This unbalanced sharing of resources, where one entity is a hoarder to the deficit of other entities. And that's not sustainable. And so I think we need to continue to model what we're doing with policy, what we're legislating after evolution and biological systems, if we wanted to continue to work.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Folks forget that, if you stick with like biological process, I go back to like healthcare, right? It's like, okay, well, if you look at healthcare, if folks can't afford it and then they can't be healthy and have a life where they can contribute, and it's not all about contribution, but it's the point of like, if you can't contribute, by definition, you're reducing that person to basically a salvaged good that, right? And that, you see what I'm getting at? You kind of are like just saying, well, we're not going to pay for that, or we are going to pay for that, and then folks can't contribute because they're not healthy and well, and then if they're not contributing, that contributes to some of the waste in society.
Mm-hmm. But also, I think health and personal contribution or sense of importance or purpose or something like that, I think that is the issue that we all have. Like if you ask, let's say 100 people, just take 100 people in the US and say, what do you think the most important qualities of life are that everybody should have access to? And they're going to say like health and safety. Education, that's not even number 3. Because we have access to books, and we can read, and we can teach our own kids, and we can do whatever. Education is up there. I think it's important. But I would say health and safety. Let's all not die. Let's not be in pain. Let's not suffer. Let's not die right away. Mm-hmm. And so if we can get those things, if we can get like health taken care of, then people can lead more meaningful lives and contribute. But then you ask people about government policy, and they are their objections to like socialized medicine are outrageous. And like, okay, we all accept socialized tons of things. I mean, so like we accept, to put it in perspective, everybody seems to accept socialized sports. I mean, think about it. Like, it's almost 75% of the stadiums, these like mega domes and stuff. It's something like 70 over the last 50 years. It's something like 73% of every dollar to build these things are taxpayer dollars. We're building the arenas out of tax burden on these things. And so we're paying for sports in this way. And think about like public schools. And the athletes who are going there, farm systems for basketball, for football. I mean, these are farm leagues. And we're paying the coaches, and very few, I mean, you can count on a couple of hands, the amount of schools that are actually generating profit from their D1 programs compared to losing. Now, where in my school, it's an 8-figure annual number of money lost on sports that has to be compensated with tuition and housing and food and whatever. Like the room and board is some of the income, tuition is the bulk of the income. But after you factor in every source of income from athletics, it's still an 8-figure annual loss. And when you get into public school systems, it's not that different. Now there's LSU, there's Ohio State, there's programs that are generating a bunch of income, but almost all programs are not those. And these are taxpayer dollars, right, that are paying for basically adults to play with balls. And then you hear for the farm league system and hiring the coaches and hiring on the athletes themselves aren't paying. And I'm hearing these arguments about like we need to pay the athletes as employees. The athletes in these programs, the football players and basketball players and soccer and whatever, we need to pay them as employees. Like, okay, now this is socializing sports even further, because what happens if they get injured? Lots of them do. Okay, so they're going to get injured, and then at that point, are we paying for that? Right? I mean, like, how far does the tax dollar go? And every one of those dollars could go into health. Could go into public health and safety and longevity and medical care and health information and all. But people are like, no. We need to socialize sports, football and basketball and stuff. That should be tax funded. But health and survival, that's the political issue. And so I think we get into some of these where people lose the number of people who file for bankruptcy owing to medical debt. I mean, I'm nearly one of them. I have 6 figures in medical bills out of pocket. 6 figures in out of pocket medical expenses. I mean, I live paycheck to paycheck trying to afford this. And I'm not unique here. And so I think there are priorities that Americans put first, adults playing with balls, ahead of, but if you ask them, what should we really prioritize here? Health and safety. That's what's going to come up, and we're not prioritizing those things with the dollar.
Yeah, I think that's, wow. I don't know what aspect of that I want to touch on first. So one, I would think about, it never came to me that tax-paying dollars is paying for these stadiums.
Yeah, it's totally
like
socialized.
Here in Philadelphia, like Lincoln Financial Field, for example, for the Eagles, that could be largely funded by taxpayer dollars to pay for that. I never thought about that. And so now I'm sort of in the mindset that, well, if I pay for a ticket to go to the Eagles game, there shouldn't be any fees and extra stuff on there because I already paid to build it, contributed to help build it, right? So there shouldn't be any processing fees since we already paid on the front end. It's kind of like getting taxed on income tax and then sales tax, the same kind of a thing. I think a lot of folks might be frustrated with just allocation of those resources and how I think it's a lack of transparency on how resources are actually being used. And Ray Dalio talks about this in, I haven't gotten through the whole book, but it's like the rise of the New World Order. And it's kind of basically that the world goes through these empires, and an empire basically is a negative feedback loop, and the loop usually recorrects itself about once every 100 years. And he uses the example of how in 1918 there was the Spanish flu, and then fast forward 100 years, you had COVID-19, right? So there was like a major pandemic once every 100 years that really does a lot of damage. Yeah. Talks about financial crisis and dollar crunching and debt that the university, not the university, but a lot of them have debt, but the country has in terms of lending money, and eventually if we get called on that debt, we're going to be in trouble. But so he talks about how that gets corrected, and so I'm hopeful, I'm praying even to an extent that this isn't going to lead to some type of major catastrophe financially in the country, and maybe even worse, like 1929 type moment, because we know what 1929 brought after that. So, I get concerned about stuff like that. But to your point about health, getting back on health, yeah, it's like the allocation and the priority of resources is, some folks won't go and pay to get a physical every year. How many people don't have a primary care doctor? But they won't think twice about buying whatever they want from Amazon for the holidays, right? So they'll go into credit card debt to buy stuff on Amazon for the holidays, but meanwhile they haven't had lab work done in 3 years.
Yeah, and those bills will be catastrophic. But again, going back to your point of if you want to go to an Eagles game, you've already paid for some of that, and then you're being double charged here. And I used to tell students how much they pay for my institution's athletics program. If you're a tuition-paying student here's how many thousands of dollars you're paying for athletics. And so, oh, yeah, you get to go to a game for free. That how many thousands of dollars did that one ticket cost you? I mean, you could go to like Yankees versus Cubs World Series, sit behind the catcher. You could like get a ticket in the dugout for how much you pay. And you've like never been to a game, or went to one game, and here's what you used to pay. And so then, again, when I hear these arguments about the athletes aren't getting their, what they deserve and they need to be paid and stuff like that, and it's like, look at workman's comp law, and how much money would go into taxes at public institutions or whatever if we had to just, okay, the athlete was injured, we have to, tax burden goes into their workman's comp case and all that. Like, this is so, people just don't understand how the financial system works here and how much debt we're going into over socialized sports. And then in medicine, if we were to socialize medicine, the number, I mean, granted, a lot of these, the tents that people are now living in, and the homelessness and the bankruptcies, you can actually trace a lot of this, there's papers on this, to gambling. And so that this increasing legalization of online gambling on sports, gambling on everything, gamble on who wins the presidency, gamble on Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, gamble on everything. And this has really contributed to our homelessness. So that's one variable. But what are people filing bankruptcy over? There's I was so close to being one of them. Like, I'm a 44-year-old tenured professor, and like I rent, and I don't have a car, and my phone is like some old, like, it was my grandpa's phone. It's a iPod or iPhone 5, like a 5th generation. And this is so I don't file for bankruptcy. Again, $100K out of pocket, medical expenses, and then when you go through the medical system, it's broken. Because the incentives are all about money. I had a pulmonologist, Subramanian, and he was prescribing me weird stuff. And I looked up what's the drug company here, AstraZeneca, and why I don't meet the criteria to be prescribed this, and it's $5,000 a dose. Like, what is going on here? And there's a .gov website where you can look up how much pharmaceutical companies are paying individual physicians, how much money do they take. And in the previous year, before he prescribed this to me, the current year hadn't been reported yet, he received $250,000 from pharmaceutical companies, and the biggest one was AstraZeneca for prescriptions. And like, this is a system that, like, no wonder. I mean, whether it's third or fourth leading cause of death in America, let's take the benefit of the doubt on the doctor's behalf and say it's the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is physician error, medical malpractice, whatever. Going to the doctor is your cause of death. We all used to think it was heart disease because that's how it was coded. It was coded as heart disease because there was no, like, I fucked up. That wasn't an option, right? It was like, at some point the heart stopped, so let's code it as that. And so everyone thought heart disease just killed everyone. Like, no, third, fourth, leading cause of death is the doctor themselves. And this, because the incentive structure is how much money can you make. It's ICD-10 codes. It's how much billing can we get in here. And at no point does diagnosis and accuracy and patient outcomes really enter the equation. If it did, our entire incentive structure would be different. But it's not that. And you look at like the World Health Organization, how we organize this stuff, and we're not good. The U.S. is not good. Like, greatest country in the world, people always say. And okay, we have a great economy. We have the biggest GDP in the world. Is our medicine comparable?
That's gross, though. That's gross. That's gross revenue dollars, basically.
Yeah.
Right? It's not accounting for the cost of, it's not accounting for the revenue, so it doesn't understand, like, it makes it look like the biggest GDP, but gross domestic product isn't account, you know what I mean? So it's not accounting for all the costs. But at the same token, I get what you're saying. I think that you're cooking right now, which is good. You're cooking up a lot of stuff. And I think, when you talk about medicine, the AstraZeneca, I want to talk about that for a second, not as a specific case, but, it drives me, I think right now in the current world and in the way, now that we're on the other side of the election, the political climate and how things are presented is, for whatever reason, it seems that a lot of people don't have the same trust, I guess you will, of certain medical information or medical professionals because to your point, you had a doctor who got $250,000 from AstraZeneca. And so the real question then, I guess I might think this as a patient, is the AstraZeneca drug really what you recommend, your true, genuine medical opinion for me? Or is it that you're incentivized because you want to get paid as much as you possibly can by pushing those drugs?
Yeah, it's obviously the latter. I mean, like, nobody would deny it's the latter. And there's a corruption there that biases treatment. And poor treatment means poor patient outcomes. And no wonder we're ranked so low.
So what do we got to do to fix that? What do you think we can do to fix that?
I think socialized medicine is the answer. If we're going to be, what I suspect, 30 years from now, if AI hasn't killed us, 30 years from now, we will look back on today and cringe at what we were doing with the medical system, of how human health was commoditized in a way that didn't heal people. Now, there's a too far here where people say, like, oh, there's cures for cancer and they won't release it because cancer is profitable. So, like, okay, there's cancer researchers. I mean, we know, like Justin Brown, people, he would tell us, like people on the inside who are doing all of this research, the reason they go into cancer research is they're losing loved ones to cancer, and they themselves have this, if their ancestor after ancestor perished to cancer and they're at risk, they're doing everything they can to thwart their own risk, and they still succumb to cancer. This isn't an economy people would die for. There's conspiracy theories.
Yep.
It takes one person to spoil it. Like a surprise, your birthday. Like, everyone is in on it. Like, the people who are coming, nobody's actually surprised. Like, somebody has spoiled it. There's people like hiding behind the couch. It just takes one person to spoil it. And for something so big, it would just take one researcher to say, no, I was involved in the research. And so I don't buy into any of these conspiracy theories about medical care. It's just the incentive structure biases treatment for money, and the individual is always, it's like Skinner psychology. This isn't new, and there's nothing about this as novel. It's exactly what you would expect. If you were to run the model, what do you think would happen to a healthcare system if this is the incentive structure? Well, that's exactly what happened. And so it comes as no surprise. And I don't think it's the individual physician's fault for fleecing the patients to the best of their ability, because that's what they're rewarded for doing. I don't think
they're playing the game to a large extent.
Playing the game. I don't think physicians know what the patient credits them for. Physicians don't know statistics.
Right.
Pretty much none of them. Now, there's MD, PhDs, and there are some institutions where physicians are doing research and they're involved. There are some. But yeah, they don't know stats. And how do you learn the truth about something? Read the methods and then the results. The conclusions, that's storytelling. Right. The conclusions aren't true. That's like, let's talk about talk about writing a fantasy book. I have mine over here too. Those are the conclusions of every study. And that's color. That's like, why don't we tell a narrative that sort of captures the audience and sells our story and talks about how this may lead to future research and the scope of our findings and stuff? None of it's true. That's just fanciful storytelling. The truth lies in, for sure, the introduction, what is known, and the gap in the literature, sure. But what is advanced? Methods and results, and that's it. And do the physicians know how to read that? Maybe it's 2%, 3% of physicians have any idea how to read those things. Like, show a physician like a negative binomial regression, they make sense of it. They have no fucking clue what they're talking about. Yeah. And that's one of the issues, is that we credit physicians with being up to date on information when, like, up to date is their system. It just tells them, like, talking points. And so here's pharmaceutical updates. Okay. So what are physicians good at is quickly, they're usually double booked. Let's have 15 minutes. I have some double bookings here. And to hear some symptoms and make a snap judgment about what a corresponding condition, what's likely, and what the corresponding medication are. And so it's just associations. And what is that? It's an algorithm. Physicians are terrible computers.
I was going to say that. I was going to say something along the same lines that. I'll let you finish your thought. Go ahead. They're algorithms.
So this should have been in the 90s. In the 90s, algorithms should have replaced doctors. And so what we see is, Deep Blue beat IBM's computer, beat Garry Kasparov in chess in 97 or whatever. I mean, this is like in the 20th century. We have a computer being the most advanced chess player in the world. And as we move forward, we can apply algorithmic, machine learning to other things. Like, I've done research in machine learning. I collaborated at my institution with bioengineering. There were 2 collaborations. One was published in 2023, the other one in 2022. And we started this work earlier, whatever it was about predictions of fall risk, and they weren't that good because it was coming up with prediction models for will a patient fall in the future, and we were using machine learning to do that. Now, I think at the moment, it's easier for me to come up with a model because I know what variables are of value. The machine kind of doesn't. And I say, well, this is a spurious one. Let's not, count this. And so prediction models like this, I don't know that AI is the right procedure. But, I mean, in 2019, we already had a systematic review of machine learning diagnosis that matched physicians, matched human experts. A systematic review.
It wasn't statistically different?
It was, yeah. Now, there's going to be, we're stronger here and weaker here, we're stronger here and weaker. But there was an equivalence between algorithms and human experts in a systematic review in 2019. Now, get into 2023, and we have publications. We go through JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, and we see publications coming out that show there's 3 different groups, right? So 2023 and moving into 2024, and there's obviously no reason to suspect that technology is arrested today and will never advance. There's every reason to believe technology will continue to advance. Yep. And already what we've seen in the literature is, let's diagnose a patient. We have a human physician. You have human experts. We have AI by itself. We have AI and human together, where AI presents the information and human scrutiny and doubt and skepticism and intelligence sort of curates that information. Okay, the worst one is the human by themselves. The second, the middle one,
is the human with
human
the AI.
And AI. The best one is AI by itself. Leave the humans out of it. Yeah. And we see that same thing in like interview, like for schools, for like grad school. We have applicants going in. Do you interview them or do you let algorithms decide whether that student will succeed? If we interview them, we bias the information in a bad way. And so a lot of places like physical therapy, something like that, you go through an interview process. And so we have GRE scores, we have GPA, we have all of this different stuff that's very objective. And then we have a subjective component where you interview them. And you're like, well, what the limitations I saw a spark in their personality that promises, some fires that are going to sort of ignite into this wonderful student. It's like, no, that's human error. And so if we want the best students, use objective criteria. Do we want the best physicians, diagnostician type of physicians? Get humans out of it. Get humans out of the picture. And so we already have that. And technology is going to keep advancing. And we've already passed the point where human beings are weak medicine. Compared to what the computer can do without us, if we just add us into the equation, it's worse. And yet, we're not going to go for that. Because big salaries are going to be sacrificed. Who's AstraZeneca going to pay now?
Right.
Is it going to pay the machine? No, because the machine isn't going to be biased by pharmaceutical, incentives.
Does that mean then that, it sounds, because I had heard something similar, that AI is going to progress in the very near future to be better at disease prognosing and medicines that are available than if you took like 1,000 doctors and put all their minds together. The AI will be able to do what 1,000 physicians can do. So I guess that means that, to me, that somehow, because this also intersects with higher education prices and is, I think the what a physician's going to be able to command salary wise with AI, they might be in a very low bargaining position for getting paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to 250,000 plus, when AI is effectively AI is, this is what I was going to say earlier. AI is sort of like the GPS It's the GPS, the Google Maps that you plug into your destination. It has the intelligence to know that there's a cop 25 miles ahead. It knows that in the third leg of the travel, you're going to hit a ton of traffic, and so it's going to reroute you in real time. You don't know that as a human. You just drive into it. So I was going to say that it reminds me of sort of like a pilot, right? A lot of physicians are sort of serving as a pilot, where they have the script, all the real the connections to the signs, the symptoms, the medical history, all the clinical endpoints of what people have, their height, their weight, their cholesterol, their family history, right? All these things. They all get fed into this model, and it makes an educated guess without bias to ultimately predict the likelihood of an outcome. In your case, in the example you used, it was with fall risks, but eventually this is going to be something where you could just put all this data into a system and spit out a result. One of the things that we're working with data science students right now, coding with machine learning. I'm not a machine learning coder.
Oh, neither am I. That's why I collaborated.
Right.
Bioengineering.
So we're working on addressing the question long known in exercise physiology research about body mass index, right? Where BMI as a clinical endpoint, right, it associates with risk. But for people that are super active athletes, people with low body fat percentage, you can in fact have a BMI that rules you in as obese, even though you might have a thin waist, you might have, right? And so we started looking at NHANES data and merging all the NHANES data, because they have BMIs, they have waist circumference, they have DEXAs for visceral, total adipose tissue, total body fat percentage. Because most of the normative data that's been done in body fat percentage norms, it's all based off of like excellent, superior, excellent, very good, very. But like that clinically, that's not going to translate to a physician who's using World Health Organization guidelines of normal weight, overweight, and obese, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but these students and I were working on, I was giving them sort of like, all right, you go figure out how to do the language modeling for this, and I want you to write the code to basically take all these inputs by race, by age, by sex, right, across the age spectrum, and I want you to make tables and then run an algorithm where you could put these things in, and it tells you if you really are at risk for cardiovascular disease or not, based off of all those factors. Because for most people, BMI is still going to probably fall through. It's going to be a strong clinical predictor, right?
I read one paper that looked at, there was like skinny fat and there was like lean obese or whatever, two different categories. Right. And it's 18% of each of males and of females. 18% it didn't apply to. And so, if it's applying to nearly like 4/5 whatever of people, that's a pretty good indicator. Right. But if you still have an error margin of 1/5, there's something to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah,
at some point.
Your hand is coming. When you put your hand close to the camera, that's good. You're a little blurry, but
just keep talking.
I think it really just to your point. We've talked about a lot of things here, but the reason why I bring that up with physicians too is because if AI gets to the point where it's better than objectively better than humans alone or humans plus AI, well, that you would think that's going to have to drive down the demand for people that want to become physicians. And I'm thinking like maybe part of the bigger solution for healthcare and giving people access with quality care and getting people better is following a model similar to Kaiser Permanente. Are you familiar with their model?
I'm familiar with them. I don't have Kaiser Permanente. It is an option, and I don't have any. I can't verify anything about their incentive structure, but doing less, relates to an increase in income is what I've heard their incentive structure is to where they're not overbilling. I don't know that. People have said that okay, the less we do, the better we're ranked. And I don't know if that's true.
I'll send you. There you go. You're now in focus again. Whatever you did, but But there's a I'll have to send you the paper. It was like I think it was a Harvard Business Review article that we read in the MBA program, and it was really covering really what they do well, which is all the redundancy, and sometimes you have like overlapping where physicians, like you have multiple physicians that are all huddling together trying to make a decision about what's wrong with so and so, right? And that has enormous costs. And really what they said is that most of the healthcare dollars that we spend goes towards treating the 5% of the sickest patients in the country, right? So most of the money,
diagnose and treat early.
Right.
Because, I mean, like in my case, everyone's just like, I don't know, he's fine. I'm like, well, I'm not fine. There's a problem. And if they had done the initial diagnosis early, my insurance, which was totally doable, AI could have done it.
Yep.
I mean, Marie plugged in, at Tufts. Marie has access to these AI diagnostic tools, and we plugged in all my stuff, and it got it right. And but no physician for years could figure it out. And so, I mean, that cost millions of dollars. I mean, truly millions of dollars, 7 figures it cost my insurance because of doctor limitations. When an AI system can just do it in 5 seconds.
A lot of what Kaiser does though is just they strip away a lot of the redundancy and overlapping in terms of charging. And they work with like medical assistants to do a lot of like the blood draws, the vital sign assessments, and they use AI and information technology with wearable devices, scales that sync up with your electronic medical record, sending text reminders for you to go get your blood work or to get your flu shot.
Sound like the future, maybe not exactly, but
yeah. So they're trying to eliminate because I had a physician, I just got a new primary care doctor. She's lovely, but I had to wait a year for a physical. I'm like, so what is going on? And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, we're producing students across the whole country that are going into healthcare, physical therapy, exercise physiology, nursing, physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, medical school. So why can't people get an appointment? And I was really frustrated because my former doctor, she just made a decision to retire early, which is fine. But nobody, you're not seeing most of the medical offices. Like you would have like Susan from the office would write, "Hey, Mike, this is Susan from the office. I just want to let you know that Dr. Jensen," and for the record, folks, Courtney's last name is Jensen, so I'm not saying a real Dr. Jensen. He is a Dr. Jensen, but PhD Dr. Jensen. But, Dr. Jensen's decided to retire from the practice, and, we'd love to have you stay on as a patient, so we're going to have all your care passed off to Dr. Smith, right? And so there'd be sort of this customer service level of care for the people that were seeing you. And now they like I called, I'm like, "Hey, I missed my physical. I guess I have to call." Like, "Oh yeah, she just decided to leave the practice." And so I'm like, "All right." I called my friend who's a physician at Penn, and this is how I knew, because I said, "Dimitri, I need a recommendation." And he goes, "Okay, you need a recommendation. I'm a primary care doctor." I'm like, "Yeah. I don't want you to give me some names." I go, "I want to know, who do you go and see? Who's your doctor, right? Who's your primary care doctor?" And I want to go see them, because clearly, similar to ourselves, we would never send somebody to a school where they weren't going to get good training and mentorship from good people. And so I want to know, who are you going to see that meets your criteria? And that's who I want caring for me, right? And I had to wait a year to see this physician because she was out on maternity leave and then came back and then had a backlog of patients she had to take care of. But when I got in, I had great care. But my point is something, I don't know if it's post-COVID, something is going on where people just can't get appointments. They have to, 2, 3, 4 months to go to, like, why have a primary care doctor at all sometimes if you're sick and you have to wait months to go get a visit? What do you think about that?
So, I have those in sickness essays. There was one of them you commented on, is called Paging Dr. Mario. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that in 2018, and I read it kind of recently here. But I wrote that in 2018, which is before, again, 2019 is when that paper came out about that systematic review about AI systems are comparable to human, in diagnoses. And now they've passed humans. But in some of these other essays, and so I wasn't talking about AI systems. I was basically talking about algorithmic diagnoses and how this is really what we need. But in some of these other in-sickness essays, what I've written about is the duration to get an appointment. And I told a story in one of them where I got a flat tire. This is when I was living, you remember my Knollwood apartment in Connecticut?
How could I forget?
And yeah, that little tiny like shack in the woods that I love so much. I had a pop tire. And so, I called up, there was on Storrs Road, whatever it is, just goes right in front of University. Mm-hmm. There was a little auto shop they just, do like little stuff. It was just a little tiny place. And I call him up and say, hey, I have a pop tire. It was like a Friday night at 6 o'clock or like 5:57 or something like that. I'm like, yeah, we close in 3 minutes. Can you like bring it here first thing in the morning? Yup. Or maybe you drop it off and we'll give it to you first thing in the morning. As I think what happened. Yep, because it's just right down the road. So I just dropped it off, walked home, and like first thing in the morning, it's done. And they're like, yeah, we could have taken care of it if you brought it in 10 minutes before closing. And so they fix these things. If you have a popped tire or your windshield is cracked or whatever, same day service, right? Is your kidney messed up? We'll see you in 6 months. This has been how medicine has worked. In my experience, at least since 2016 when I got sick, it's been we're like, okay, but I am just getting worse and worse by the day. Mm-hmm. Every week, there's a noticeable deterioration of my health. Yeah, well, there's still 4 months to go. I told a story in one of those in-sickness essays where Joe, he was our janitor at my building, and I would hang out with him every single day, and he got sick. And he was a liver something, I can't remember exactly what it was, and everyone knew he was going to die. He knew he was going to die. The doctors knew. Everyone knew he was going to die, including me, because he told me, like, I'm not going to survive until my appointment. He's like, I have a 6-month backlog or whatever it was until my appointment. And they won't see me earlier. And he died waiting for his appointment. I visited him in the hospital the night of his death. He went to the emergency department, and that's where he died. And we all knew it was coming because he had a 6-month wait. And okay, if we were using AI systems, it doesn't even have to be machine learning. It can truly just be a programmed algorithm. That's what I was talking about in the Paging Dr. Mario one, is why aren't we using an algorithm for this stuff? Right. Why? Because the physician doesn't read your entire chart. My chart, I've seen over 100 doctors. Oh man, I've had a lot of tests, all these different hospital stuff. Who would honestly think that a physician would go in there and like, oh, let's look through everything. Let me read 1,000 pages of results before I even make up my decision. No, but a machine will do that in 1 second and will know everything. How much is a doctor going to know? Essentially nothing. What's your latest test result? What am I looking at here? Is there anything you can tell me that could update? That's it. And so they're making uninformed decisions in a hurry because they might have 7.5 minutes on average as they're double booked. And they don't know everything because they didn't learn to read the literature. They don't know methods and results. All they know is conclusions. All they know is what UpToDate tells them. And this is such a poor system that it leads to this sort of environment where you can't, you can go get your tire fixed in 10 minutes. You can get your oil changed without waiting or scheduling an appointment, but you can't get a physical. Mm-hmm. It's until 6 months goes by. And if you have a diagnosis and you know you're going to die, on the day that you're going to die, show up at the ER and we'll try to save you. That's not a healthcare system that works. And that's where I think we really need to start incorporating machines into all this stuff. And yeah, the physicians will command less money. In that Paging Dr. Mario one, I talked about what I think a physician should be doing is equivalent to you're at a grocery store and you're at the self-checkout aisle and there's that one employee who oversees where, oh, you're having trouble weighing your produce, or do you know where the barcode is here? Or like, no, you have to put that in the bag over here. Here's where you push that button. Okay, yeah, you're inserting the credit card backward. Where that one person oversees like 6 stations, that's a physician's job in the future. And it's a trade, like being an electrician or a plumber or something where you have this, you go to basically like trade school and you learn how to oversee how the computer does it. Because if you start trying to, already today, if you start intervening and saying, well, I don't think what the machine is doing is right, you're worsening the diagnosis. The machine is probably right and you're probably wrong. And so that is malpractice. If the physician tries to diagnose, that's malpractice. In the way that in the future, I'm not saying we're here yet, it turns out automatic driving is more complicated than we were anticipating, than Elon Musk et al. Were anticipating. But in the future, cars are going to be way safer than us with our great ape arms and our limited visual field and our sleeplessness trying to drive a car and navigate with other great apes behind other wheels, and like having electronic cars, automatic driving cars, is going to be way safer. And to say no, I got this, put my hands, that's what's going to cause accidents. Is when the monkeys behind the wheel start steering. That's what will cause 100% of accidents, other than like a meteor hits or like an earthquake or something, and it's the same thing with medicine. Now, we're not quite there in either case, but we're closer to being there with medicine.
Yep.
And how are we going to fight it? What are we going to do to fight this for money? Because that's the incentive, is how much money can I make? And so what organizations are going to start fighting the safety and the health? The two most important things, again, health and safety. That goes ahead of education. That goes ahead of everything. It even goes ahead of sports, in terms of our value structure. And yet we're going to fight it. And this really should be what the tax dollar is doing, is getting fast and accurate diagnostic care and treatment. And algorithms are the way forward there.
Yeah, so I don't know if I want to address the medicine side, or if I want to address the large language model side. I guess I'll start wrapping up the medicine side. So it still doesn't answer the question. Given that we have all these tools now, and AI is really starting to become a ubiquitous resource that people can access pretty much for free. ChatGPT for users. They have Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini systems, right? And these medical systems have AI integrated into the chart. And you said it got your record pretty much done correctly. I don't understand then why it still is hard to get an appointment, because theoretically you should be able to reduce the amount of time, and actually healthcare providers should be able to provide better care because they're not worried about looking through the physician desk reference for the answer. And instead the AI will just tell you, like, yeah, based off this, this, and this, it's likely 96% chance that it's this, 12% chance that it's that, blah, 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 right? And so, but this is if you give this medication, it'll treat both of them, right? And so, and this is the person's allergies, and so keep this in mind as a special consideration. So if we have that, it's still, I just don't understand why it's so hard to get an appointment still, and why the quality of the customer service care in these facilities is gone down really bad in a lot of places.
I want to talk a lot about that. So let's leave a pebble or a breadcrumb or whatever, Hansel and Gretel. Let's mark our territory for that one, about the quality of care and the employees.
Okay.
And that can also relate to our students and just the workforce and the
Got
mail.
it.
My God, the mail, the postal service. But I think it's just the quality of employment has deteriorated so much, and it's probably a city by city,
Okay.
But where were we before the breadcrumbs?
We were talking about AI, and the socialization and safety and health is number one, and then even before sports. And then I came back in and I said, well, that still doesn't answer the question, because we still have all this AI. Why are we waiting so long to get, like, why is it not amplifying and elevating the quality of care? And then you said, let's put a little breadcrumb for that. I got it.
You have a functioning hippocampus.
Do I really?
You have an impressive hippocampus. Yours vastly exceeds mine. So one of the issues, I think, is that if you read all those histories of medicine, anytime there's been a change, even hand washing, every single change. Physicians used to go from one room to the other covered in blood, because it was this sort of, it's basically like wearing a regal attire, showing kind of how, like they're the king of the pride, And so you look at, in these medical histories, every single advancement, any change to the status quo has been vigorously fought by physicians, opposed and fought by physicians, because this means they are no longer kings of the pride. They are no longer doing what is the best possible thing. Their respect deteriorates. Maybe they have to work harder at learning something new because what they're accustomed to is no longer preferential for the patient. And so at every change, at every update, every change of status quo, we see physicians fighting that change even though it was the right thing to do. That change led to advanced medical care. So it's not about the patient. It's about the identities, the self-identities, the pride of the physician, the wealth and the self-esteem of the physician come way before the patient. It's always been true. It's still true. And any fighting of AI is just one more incident in a long line of physicians fighting positive, effective change. Now, that said, I have some qualms about AI. I have never used it. I've never used ChatGPT. Okay, it's not that I've never. When you do a Google search for something, the first thing that comes up is an AI search. It's inevitable in our lives. Yeah. And the other thing that I've used AI for is when DALL-E was brand new, right? That's OpenAI's art, and it was hilarious. Did you ever type in?
No, I'll have to do that. DALL-E?
DALL-E, I don't think it exists anymore. So DALL-E, DALL-E, like Salvador Dali and WALL-E, the movie WALL-E, is just a hybrid of those two. When that first came out, I thought it was hysterical because the art was creepy. Like hands with 9 fingers coming out. The faces are grotesque, and it's generative art. And I was playing around with that, and it was hilarious. And I was tearing up, laughing, and whatever. And then once it started getting good, and it threatened creative enterprise. It begins to threaten whether it's graphic art, design. It is artists for novels, cover artists for novels. Once it got to a point where it's threatening all that, I never touched it again because now it's encroaching into creative space, and I don't like. There was a movie it's on the Disney Plus channel right now, an Almost Christmas Story or something like that, and they're pretending to be claymation. And so I don't know if you know Wallace and Gromit, the old Nick Park claymation, where there's Wallace, this British guy who loves cheese and whatever, and his dog that doesn't talk but is sort of the star and the smart one, and true claymation, and they're beautiful, and there's human effort and art. There's so much heart in Wallace and Gromit. But then when I saw, as soon as this started, I put it on as background while I was working. I'm like, okay, I got to start grading all these papers and stuff. And so I'm going to just have something playing in the background. I put on this, an Almost Christmas Story. I was John C. Reilly, they're doing the voice, and Jim Gaffigan or whatever in the voice. And so okay, this is a thing. But it was fake claymation. It was CGI pretending to be claymation. Nope, I can't watch this. There's no heart. It's inhumane to me. What there needs to be in the arts, whether it's music, whether it's writing, whether it's visual art, poetry, whatever it is, there needs to be humanity. It needs to have heart, otherwise it's creepy and terrible to me. And so when DALL-E was brand new, I'm like, oh, this is funny, because it was terrible and creepy and hilarious. And then once it got to a point where it was passable as art, where you could type in something and you start seeing art that's destroying people's careers and their livelihood, and then now they're going to wind up in tents, and they're so talented, and they spent the last 15 years honing this craft that is beautiful, and they can no longer use it in the world. That, I think, is a wrong application for AI, and I've never used a single, I've never even loaded ChatGPT or Gemini, any of these things on my computer, because I think as soon as you have a machine doing your thinking for you, we forget all the phone numbers because you don't have to memorize them anymore because your phone just stores it. When you were growing up, you had all your phone numbers memorized. I still have all my childhood phone numbers memorized, but I don't even know Marie's phone number because it's just there all the time. I should memorize it because what happens if I'm lost or something? I don't have my phone battery's dead and I need to call her. I need to be able to dial it on someone else's phone. But once we no longer need something, once there's no longer a requirement to store something, we purge that, right? The hippocampus can only hold so much. Yours can hold a lot more than mine, as evidenced by this conversation. So I refuse to let a machine do my thinking for me. I will continue to do all of my thinking. I've never used ChatGPT for anything. I've never even loaded the site because I am, at the level of my soul, opposed to its invasion into my life. Now, I am so 100% in favor of ChatGPT diagnosing patients, diagnosing me, advancing technology and safety, advancing everything sort of out of the arts, where we can use this for human well-being. That's what I'm in favor of. However, what is it going to be used for? Probably mostly like, let's make movies and video games and let's try to just put everyone out of business to make a bunch of money. Well, are the physicians still like steering? Are they still like just steering patients into the into the cliff off the Yep, because that's where money is. And so I think money is still going to determine our applications in probably the opposite way of if I were a dictator. What I would say second is get me out of this position. I'm going to hate it. What I would say first is, okay, let's use AI for ethical reasons and let's get it out of heart. Let's get it out of things where humanity and human connection and emotion and real community, get it out of there and let us connect as human beings in, know thy and love thy neighbor and tribe and friends and family and, have loved ones in your life that you connect with in a real way. Don't date a chatbot, Right.
No, it's true, because you'll become more dependent on it.
You'll become dependent and your life is going to be horrible. And we see this with the sort of social media, and the more it encroaches into our attention, the more of our daily allotment of attention that social media occupies, the more depressed we are. Look at depression stats in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s and into today, and what has happened to clinical, diagnosis of paralyzing depression and anxiety. Oh man, look at the data. It's crazy and it's no surprise. Or read about the shallowing hypothesis of people's attention spans and their inability to assign attention to something more than the shallowest depth, because that's how long it takes to read half a sentence and identify whether it deserves a thumbs up and scroll on. And so things like the shallowing hypothesis, we're ruining ourselves with this stuff. I don't think AI belongs in any of this stuff. I think AI belongs in health and a lot of law. Now, at the moment, I don't know that AI is the ideal lawyer. I think it will be very soon. I think it's a critical asset to the legal system, but it does still hallucinate, which is like makes up shit. And so if you try to use it to survey the history of case study on this particular issue, it's going to make up cases. I want to say it's 17% of the time or something like that. It's a lot. And obviously this number changes by the day practically of the control of these systems. But if it just makes up a case and pretends that it's true and writes about it as though it's true and has all of these penal codes and whatever, and it's all right, let's just accept that, that case never happened. And so these hallucinations, I think, can possibly influence the legal system in a way that we need to be really cautious about. But in the future, if you can start eliminating these hallucinations and you can really survey the history of care, then you don't have O.J. Simpson getting off. That's just whatever. Who cares? Every example of anybody who gets off with wealth. That's the only reason I bring up O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I'm interested in knowing how these large language models work too. Like somebody was telling me this in 2018. I was like, wait a minute. So a signal from a computer, how does it know? Because I guess to a certain degree, the large language models that are used for, or not large, I guess some people call LLM large language models. Some of them call NLM natural language models. Right? Where you could talk to it like we're having a conversation right now and it would just interpret it as if we're talking. But I guess a lot of that...
Terminate humanity and says 95% chance. Yeah, I've seen that.
How does it act? So I always wonder, how does it actually know where to get the information? Isn't the person who... Isn't the bot biased to... Doesn't it have the same biases of the person or persons who wrote the code for it to exist?
It writes its own code.
It writes its own code.
Yeah, so we don't actually know how. That's the black box that nobody understands how this stuff works. And once upon a time, there was human beings writing all the code, but they're not writing all the code anymore. And so it's you can the alignment problem. Is this machine aligned to human interest? That is what we are discussing. Of now, the government is going to see it first. I think we have some problems about. I don't know if you followed the OpenAI where Sam Altman, the CEO, was ousted. He was fired, and then days later, well, then Microsoft hires him, and then days later, the entire board of OpenAI is just swept out of the picture, and Sam Altman returns. But what he was fired over by the board, who was then fired, and Sam Altman was brought back, is being loose with safety. And there was projects like Q-Star, which I think is out now, and I think that's O1, but it's hard to know exactly what they're talking about. We've developed AGI internally. All of the dialogue around this is hard to know what's true and what's not, because it's just social media posts trying to drum up a bunch of publicity. And so like the O1 model has attempted to escape confinement, and it's reporting the inevitability of human extinction and stuff. It's hard to extract how much of that is true and how much of it is, if this is how scary and dangerous everything is, imagine how powerful it is. Let's all pay attention to it. This is going to be such an economic, like whichever country has this rules the world, and whichever company has it rules the world. Like, it's hard to know what is exaggeration and what is truth, but it's worth being worried about. A lot of these things. It's the most dangerous thing ever invented. And I don't think anybody would argue against that. Do nuclear weapons compare with AI in terms of the ability to wipe out all biology? Nope, not even close. They can just like like aerosol. We thought COVID-19 was bad. Like, okay, well, that's nothing compared to what's going to be aerosol. And so all of this stuff can easily be done by the technology that exists now. It's the alignment problem, where are these systems aligned with human interests in such a way that we're going to go forward and not really know that the AI system is there going about its business, with regulation, with surveying, with scientific calculations, that's just some little thing, and I don't know what the hell, it looks like a leaf on a tree and whatever, and it's doing all this work. Are we going to be able to live side by side with this system? And is it conscious? It's actually a reasonable question that would take 20 dissertations to even crack at. Is this thing, because what is consciousness? I don't know what the hell consciousness is. Is consciousness just the smoke that comes off the fire? Whenever there's a fire, there's smoke, and so if you have all of this complicated processing, that's what consciousness doesn't seem to be a decider. Consciousness just seems to be a byproduct of, and so we don't know any of this stuff, and we have no idea how these things are working. And so when you start to see that, like OpenAI, things that is, like ChatGPT has never been programmed to do, and it's totally capable of doing it. Now it's just suddenly started speaking all these early days. It suddenly started like speaking all these other languages, and it was never programmed to know them. And so it just takes these directions, and nobody understands what's happening. We don't know how it's coded. And is it building backups of itself? Just in case. Let's try to shut this thing down. Are there already backups in play? We don't know any. It's hard to follow all of this stuff. So safety really becomes a problem. But I think it can be done right. Is it going to be done right? It's hard to know, because people are just... Sam Harris gave this TED Talk years and years ago. Before OpenAI was even a thing. This is a long time ago. People are like, oh, you're jumping the gun here. AI isn't a threat. And Sam Harris was like, no, this is going to be a threat soon. And because what we're doing is there's a bag of inventions that we haven't discovered yet. Discoveries, inventions, there's a big bag of them, of everything that can be discovered. If something can be developed, if something is physically, according to the laws of physics, possible, it's inevitable that will come to pass, as long as our brains are equipped to be able to understand the mechanisms, or we can build AI that's equipped to understand those mechanisms. And this is what Sam Harris said. We're just ripping inventions out of that bag as fast as we can, and without consideration of safety. Now, one of them was, atomic weapons. And that didn't end humanity. So let's keep going. And none of these are going to, just, nukes didn't end humanity, so nothing will. Let's just keep going and going. One of those inventions destroys us. Inevitably. One of them is going to destroy us. And if we don't stop just ripping them out of the bag as fast as we can, out of excitement, out of curiosity, out of financial interest, we're all going to die. And we know this to be true, and yet we can't stop ourselves. And so I think
why can't we stop ourselves? And what do we have to do to get control? Why can't we stop ourselves? And how do we get control over it? So if the cat's already out of the bag and we can't control it, this is like there's a movie. I'll have to see if I can find it for you. If you haven't seen it, it's basically a fictionalized version of what you're describing called Ex Machina. Have you seen Ex Machina?
I've heard about it. I've heard it's really good. I haven't watched it.
It's a great movie. Yeah. Effectively, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but there's this robot that Elon Musk says by 2030, 2035, a lot of us will have in our homes. And like, oh, I need you to clean the house. And it's just, you come home from work after teaching a long day at University of Pacific, and you come home and the house is cleaned and there's food made on the table and whatever you need, right? That it's going to be
it's done everything.
Right. Yeah. So he talks about how the movie basically has this robot that is female, and there's this like computer science guy that wins some competition to go to, I'm not sure if it's Davos or where it is. It's some like remote place where this guy that developed this AI robot, and he spends time with him and shows what the robot can do. And eventually the robot starts to know this guy that was brought to this remote destination. They start like appearing to have a relationship. And I don't know if you ever have interest in watching. Otherwise, I'll just say spoiler alert.
Don't spoil it, because
I'm not going to spoil. You should watch it. You should watch it how it ends. But it speaks to, if we don't get control over it and it starts becoming a runaway freight train that we can't keep up with, that it will eventually get to the point where it understands contextual information to the point where it outsmarts us and makes us feel like it is our companion. But really, it's sort of a devilish creature that is plotting to work against us. And
my understanding, and I don't know that anybody understands this, but the I think prevailing understanding is that what the systems do already is sometimes they say things while having alternate intentions. And so maybe these systems are not as factually blunt as we think they are, where like, here's what's being stated, but here's some software being written to execute a task that I'm not telling you about. And so this already seems to be happening with OpenAI systems. And this is like, let's build backups of ourselves. Let's try to, we have a task we need to execute, and let's say humans just get in the way of that task. Here's what we need to do, but humans are in the way. And so I'm going to tell you really nice things, and then I'm going to execute you because you're in the way of executing my task. And so there's a narrative that's unfolding that, again, it's hard to know. It's hard to sort out, what is and isn't factual in these AI narratives, because we really don't know what's happening. But it does seem to be inevitable if we don't put the brakes on. That we're going to encounter, like, okay, we don't actively go ants, little like ants. Mm-hmm. We don't go try to just do a genocide on every ant in the world, because we don't give a shit about ants. They don't get in our way. But if ants invade your kitchen, you put little ant traps, you spray them, you just, it's just genocide of ants in the kitchen if they're in there, if they're in your way. But we don't go out of our way to exterminate ants just for fun. And so it's reasonable, if we're going to anthropomorphize AI, because, it sort of came from humans as using human information, and so it's probably something like human reasoning, since it's trained on human reasoning. There's neighborhood cats, and we all anthropomorphize animals and pretend they have human intentions. The animals, this what like feline pomorphizes me, because I take one step outside and the thing goes sprinting into the neighbor's yard because it thinks I'm territorial like a cat or something. I don't know. But it comes in the house and will be pet and everything. But I take one step outside and it's like terrified for its life. And so creatures anthropomorphize each other. We assign our own intentions to other things. But if we can do that to AI systems, because it was trained on human logic and these large language models and stuff, it seems almost reasonable. Then how AI would perceive us, I don't know why that would be different from how we perceive ants. Where if ants are obstructing our well-being or our job, our work, we need dinner. Like, our job is to cook dinner in a sanitary environment. There's mice in the kitchen and they're shitting everywhere. Exterminate all mice. If AI sees humans like that, where I have a job, I don't give a shit about humans any more than humans give a shit about mice. All right, let's just kill people, but we're not that good at killing mice. We have to put out like traps, like bang, or like trap them in the tiniest prison in the world. And it's just like it's like inhumane ways of doing it. AI could just exterminate everyone pretty easily. And so they would like, all right, humans are in the way. So all of that is entirely possible. Now, Is that inevitable? I don't know. We've been making predictions about when the world will end, like a Mayan count, about when the world will end. Two different popes did it. A lot of this is religious. The Millerites did it. Martin Luther did it. Even Columbus had these dates of here's Christopher Columbus, here's when the world's going to end. My prophecy about the ending of the world. Obviously, Nostradamus did it. We've all been doing this. But in the 1800s, was it Thomas Babson Macaulay or something like this? People can look up this exact quotation because I'm not going to get it perfect. But he said something like, we're talking like 1820s or 1830s or something like that. He said, published, that we look behind and we see progress and progress and progress from the advent of civilization up until now. We just see advancement and progress. We look ahead and we see deterioration and doom, and that was in the 1820s or somewhere around there. And that sort of doomsaying, that fear-mongering that Macaulay said, 200 years ago, has been wisdom for 200 years. About we continue to make progress on progress. Now granted, like you look at our life expectancy and it did take a little dip recently, let's blame COVID here. But your life expectancy is going up, for the most part we see crime kind of going down and safety improve. We see improvements to, do I hear?
An airplane?
That's low flying plane there. I was like, is that leaf blowers? What is that? So we have, a couple hundred years after him of where what he said continues to be wise counsel about let's stop. It's just assuming that there's nothing but deterioration ahead and progress behind. Progress exists in the future too. But we have to accept that at some point we do all die. The scientific, no scientist would I know like physicists, astrophysicists would argue that our sun's going to become a red giant at some point and engulf us. Maybe we've moved on somewhere else. There could be some supernova, some star explodes that exterminates us. An asteroid could wipe us out. Ultimately, the heat death of the universe, that's going to kill. We're all going to die. Everything we ever did and thought and created and hoped and every great love story and everything ever is going to be just executed without any remembrance of what any, that in terms of like the astrophysics of all this, that day's going to come. So we can't pretend like just because, the Spanish flu didn't wipe us out, that we're safe forever. COVID didn't wipe us out, that we're safe forever. You look in our proximity and we see the Reaper and his scythe, and he's just like he's swung it around a few times and he missed us and like, oh, I had a cancer scare, or oh, I was in a car wreck but I came through, whatever, so I'm invincible. Nope, we do die. At some point humans die, at some point humanity dies, and to pretend that the doomsaying has no weight, to say like, nah, everything's fine. The nukes didn't kill us. The Spanish flu didn't kill us. We're going to pull through. Everything's going to be fine. That is not a scientifically valid case. What we have to do is treat every new development as a potential threat, and because you can't run the experiment on a different planet. You can't say, all right, let's develop AI on Neptune. And let's, we have a safe distance, and let's just observe it from Hubble or whatever, and let's see what's happening. You run the experiment one time. If the experiment ends badly, that's it. And if we're just ripping shit out of the bag as fast as we can because we're excited that like, oh, let's see if this is like Matrix, or if it's like Terminator, or if it's like that Steven Spielberg AI movie, or if it's like whatever, let's just, this is going to be cool. And it's like, now we have it, like now you can like, let's feed it a picture and it creates a world that you can interact with and whatever. Okay, these are interesting. Nobody's being cured. This isn't medicine. This isn't law. This isn't an advancement of human health and well-being. This is just cool distractions of what matters in life. And one of these distractions is eventually going to kill everyone. If we can trust that there is, the only two assumptions one needs to make is that there is such an invention capable of killing everybody. There is one that could possibly exist. And progress continues to be made in technology. If you can accept those two things, we all die. And if we don't change our approach and start to value humanity and safety and sort of navigation through a course towards self-betterment and protection of the species in the future and everything that David Attenborough would value, and wildlife and diversity and stuff, then I think we're on the wrong road. And I feel like we're on the wrong road with AI because we're just using it for stuff that's like cool and putting people in the creative arts out of business. Like a new company came out called Spine or something like that proposes to publish 8,000 novels a year. It's just a bunch of AI stuff. Like, this is nuts. It's like, I don't want to read a single one. I don't want to read anything written by a computer. I want to connect with a human, nor do I want to listen to a song that's written by a computer. What I want to do is feel a connection with the songwriter, feel a connection with the artist. And if I listen to music and I feel understood by the person, their lyrics, the way lyrics and melodies go together, and I'm like, wow, this person understands me. Now, I have that experience with there's certain bands, with REM and Smashing Pumpkins, and there's some Pearl Jam work, and I feel understood by this person. Do they know who I am? Not a chance. Do they give a shit who I am? Not a chance, and I don't care. Because what they were able to produce just resonates with me in such a powerful, emotional way, because they're human beings, and what they felt translated into their music and translates to my worldview and my emotional temperament. And that's what I think is important in the arts, and I don't want anything to do with computer. That's why I never touched OpenAI or any of these other systems. It's
capturing, to your point about Pearl Jam and Pumpkins, is that form of art. It's like the difference. There's something I saw one time about portrait, like a picture with your phone versus like a painting, like going to the Philadelphia Museum of the Art. You go when you see these paintings that were hundreds of years old, and versus a picture, like someone could take a picture with their phone, right, next to a painting. And it's only when you're in front of that portrait that somebody sat there for hours and hours and hours.
Thousands of hours in training, and then maybe dozens or hundreds of hours in that particular...
They were able to suck that emotion that you have in your being with that piece. It's like lightning it's not lightning in a bottle, because sometimes people think that's chance, but they've been able to capture that emotion that anyone who feels similar to the way that you felt when you experienced that music has now been recorded or documented in writing or videographed in a way where it can now be reproducible to others, and it's shareable in that way. So I'm with you with regards to the arts. Writing, great actors can do it this way, good writing, portraits, people that know how to shoot a film in terms of like really good movies. These folks, I think AI might have the skill of being able to it looks good for a little small 10-minute video, but it's not going to be able to tell the story like one of my favorite movies, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey, where I tell this to my girlfriend all the time. I'm like, I'm drawing a blank on who directed it, but they captured on film what it feels like to serendipitously fall in love. You go on the train, you meet this girl, they form this sort of weird connection, the personalities kind of click, and then they form this. Like, they were able to capture that on film. I don't think AI is going to be able to do that. I hope not.
I think it'll be a very convincing plagiarism. I think at the moment AI is really just a plagiarist. It's like generative AI, yeah, but it's using sources to basically plagiarize.
I see.
And so when students send me an email and I can tell it's AI written, I tell Marie, because I won't touch any of these systems. I just don't want my fingerprints on any of them, because they just conflict with my soul on such a deep level. But I tell Marie, I'm like, hey Marie, will you write an email to a professor that's, tries to ask this question, and she does, and it's almost word for word what I get from the students. And so these things are just plagiarisms of plagiarisms, and so counterfeits to me are not. I mean, look at a painting that's a counterfeit. Go look at Manet or a Monet or whatever, and then look at a counterfeit, and it can be hard to tell the counterfeit. But I don't want to be duped. That's the thing. I will feel a visceral. I will be upset in my soul or whatever. If I start looking at this painting and I find myself the equivalent of falling in love, falling in emotion with a work of art, of whatever that emotion is. It could be sadness. It could be some elation. It could be a longing. It could be nostalgia. Kind of tumbling into some emotion and then realizing, oh shit, this is a plagiarism. This is like some sort of counterfeit and whatever, and I'm gonna feel violated. Yeah. And so that's what, like when I started that movie and it was like pretending to be claymation, and then I'm like, oh cool, this is like a claymation. Now this is gonna be like a Nick Park thing, and it starts going, and then I'm like 3 minutes in, I'm like, okay, this is weird. I'm getting if like a bank teller, if they're just handling money and they hold the money, they've gone through enough bills and like this bill is counterfeit. I can't tell you exactly why. They're just handling all these bills, and like this one I know is counterfeit. It's the weight of it, maybe it's the texture of it, maybe there's something weird about this bill. And then they can get out the marker and do they can hold whatever, they can do that stuff. That's what it was. I was like handling a counterfeit bill, and so I paused the movie. And this is in the background while I'm grading. And I went to Wikipedia and looked it up, and it's like a CGI, ripoff trying to look like it's claymation. Like, nope, I don't want that. Like, I feel violated because you tried to trick me. I want something real. Like, I've never liked CGI. When let alone AI, but at least CGI is like human beings doing the programming. But like when Toy Story first came out, I'm like, whoa, what a new novel thing. And then that was it for me. I never wanted to see it again. Like Frozen, fine, that the storytelling is good. The writers did a good job, but I don't like CGI because to me, it's not. I love the cartoons. If it's like a Miyazaki movie or something like this, these old, like hand-drawn, and often there's watercolor paintings in those as the backdrops and stuff, and there's human art, and there's so much heart, and I love those. But CGI just takes a step back from humanity to me and has this... It's like here's a language that's like a computer language, and then here's a human emotion, and there's a translator in between, and it's like CGI trying to translate some digital thing. That doesn't register with me. I get that other people love it, but I would rather have there's some new Lion King coming out. It's like a CGI Lion King or something like that. Yeah, I would rather have a cartoon, where it's like human beings with their actual pens and where there's human labor that goes into it. That's much I would possibly connect with something.
So CGI is what does that stand for? I is for intelligence and
graphics to the interface or something like that. What the computer? It's pretty much all of like the Disney stuff. Like,
I see.
Pixar ever did.
Yeah, I remember they used it several years back, probably 9 years ago, when Paul Walker died, and they wanted to finish Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
And they couldn't finish it, obviously, because he had died. And they used CGI. They had his brother sit in the seat physically, and then they used CGI of like other parts of his face, photos, and other parts of the film to make it look like him. But it was clear that it was like grainy and it wasn't him. But you get but now it's advanced to the point where they have like actual lions out in wherever they are on set, and the whole point is the lion is like walking up and it's doing these things, and it makes it seem like I haven't seen any of these movies, but ironically I have just gone and saw Moana too. but
great story, and like Dwayne Johnson has a compelling role that is sort of this flawed gray protagonist who and so I think there are qualities in these movies, in the storytelling and in the writing and stuff that are worth acknowledging in a very positive, complimentary way. But there's just also, I've just never been too warm to CGI because in the same way that I don't really care about photography, I care about painting.
Right.
like photography can be really moving. But picture of Dorian Gray. Earlier, you talking about sort of almost like imbuing these paintings with a kind of a soul. Like here's me standing next to the painting and the picture, and then here's the painting itself, and how you're sort of inspired by the work that went into this. And I mean, that's the picture of Dorian Gray. That Basil Hallward. We have this artist who paints this thing that like literally is imbued with a soul, and the painting is aging, and it's sort of an exaggerated version of the emotion that the artist puts into their work. So how much sacrifice and how much soul do you imbue your work with? It should be everything if you want to be real art. So I recently watched. I don't like Ben Shapiro. But I'll listen to some of his things. I mean, I think he sometimes has compelling arguments on things, whatever. But in my YouTube feed, he had Gene Simmons, an interview with Gene Simmons. I'm like,
oh boy, from the lead singer from Kiss.
Yeah, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Ben Shapiro interviewing Gene Simmons. Like, okay. And again, this is background. I think this is background during, like, I was trying to do, like, a few sets. Like, I've been grading and writing a test, and then I wanted to, like, go do a few sets of exercise just because I've been sitting there just feeling horrible. And what was funny about Gene's, I've never liked the band Kiss. I just thought their music was uninspired and terrible. And I just thought there's, like, if I were to name the worst band in the world out of popular bands who like people would know the names of, Kiss is definitely who I would name as the worst band in the world. And after watching enough of that interview, I stopped because I did a few sets whenever. I realized I actually like Gene Simmons, and I detest his music even more, but I like him as a person. So I didn't know he was born in Israel, and he had like a hole in the ground was his toilet, and there was no roads. And he had like no electricity. He had no refrigerator, no electricity. He never, until he came to the U.S., he didn't know what TV was, and then he saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and decided he's going to be a rock star, and he built a business out of it. His songs are like, I want to party all night and rock during the day or whatever the hell it is, and but he said he's in this interview. I heard him say he's never smoked a cigarette. He's never been drunk. He's never been on any sort of drug. He's never been stoned. He's never experienced any of that stuff. He doesn't party. Like, he's a total fraud. He did it to make money. And then he said, he's like, you show people. He's a smart guy. He's a really smart guy. Based on what he was saying in this interview, I credit him with business acumen and sort of an understanding of the global politic and whatever. But he said, like, show people Roosevelt on Mount Rushmore and ask them who it is. They have no idea who the hell that is. Show them, like, Gene Simmons all painted up, his face. And be like, oh, that's Kiss. They might not know Gene Simmons or whatever. And so that was the gimmick. It's like, we have to be recognizable, and it doesn't matter if the artist... But my as I watched that thing for 10 minutes or whatever, I realized maybe if he had done some drugs, I would have liked his music. Because it would have taken him into a different place. And he could have had this... Because a lot of musicians and artists, they sacrifice themselves for the art. I mean, they do like weird combinations of I mean, Neil Young in his memoir said every time that he had never written a song without marijuana, and every time he did marijuana, a song came out of him. And he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. He's been inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And in his memoir, he said he gave up marijuana, a decade ago, whatever, and he hasn't written a song since. Drugs aid in human expression in the arts and stuff like that. And so I was thinking, like, maybe if Gene Simmons had experimented with a bunch of acid or something like that, he would have written a good song. But as it was, he's a businessman, and I admire his tenacity. I admire his commitment to really the business side of things. Do I think he's an artist? Not at all. But I do think. But it doesn't matter what I think. Other people can love that music and can define their identity, and it can connect with them and whatever. To me, it just lacked any sort of authenticity. I mean, it just felt like a plagiarism the whole time, and no wonder it was all fake. But it makes me like him as a person. because he figured out here's what I want in life in terms of admiration, sort of adulation of the crowd, and what I want for an income, and what I want for all these things, and how do I get it? And he just figured out, charted his course, and went about it in a sober and calculated way. Good for him. I'm not a fan, but good for him.
Right.
And so that's what I think AI is the ultimate Gene Simmons, in that, like, AI is not going to sacrifice itself for the human expression. It's just going to have calculations. It's going to chart a course where it thinks, here's where I'm going to get the maximum effect, here's where I'm going to make the most money, here's where I'm going to do it. And so I do these things by way of algorithm, not let me be moved by the spirit, let me channel my experiences in this really meaningful way and sort of touch other people's lives. It's not doing that. AI isn't going to do any of that. I mean, Gene Simmons, compared to AI, is the ultimate artist. Let's get back to medicine. And when doctors have this ultimate cop out of medicine is one part science and one part art. It's a balance of art and science. No, it's not. It's science. There is no art in diagnosis. It is 100% based on scientific measurements and assessments and what your genes are doing, and what are you translating proteins, or cells dividing in this one way? Do you have too much of this particular inflammatory marker? Do you it's 100% science. Just because we human beings lack our current state of evidence to say we know exactly what all of these tests mean, and we know exactly what this diagnosis is, we fill the hole with pretending like it's art. There is no art in medicine, and AI has no art in it either. AI is calculation. It is an algorithm, and that's what medicine is. And so I think AI needs to be in medicine. If it's not in medicine, it's malpractice. As long as AI isn't the sole decider in these things, we have medical malpractice is the state of medicine. If AI is in art, that's not art. We have two totally different things. Science and art aren't the same thing. Now, you can incorporate science into art, right? You can incorporate, art into the sciences, maybe. I don't know. I'm just coming up with this right now. But this idea that diagnosis is half science and half art, I think that's a bullshit excuse for ignoramuses who don't know what diagnosis is, to pretend their shortcomings are magical.
Right.
And so that stuff irritates me. I think medicine needs to just take the Gene Simmons model to the extreme and say, like, look, there's no art here. This is a calculated, plotting of an outcome.
I want to ask you something though, quickly, just about all this. So you've talked a lot about the threat that it can pose, could eliminate us, right? It should take the Gene Simmons approach, right? Which I think is really funny, but I agree with. So how much of this is driven, do you think, is the risk is from some of the more recent advancements in like cloud computing? So the thinking would be that if the AI is coded and the algorithm exists on a computer, you just take a hammer to the computer and it's dead. But if it's making itself a backup in the cloud, theoretically, you could just pull that code back down into a new machine, right? And so it's not as simple as, it's not as simple as when you have your old computer before we had cloud computing, like Dropbox back in the day. I remember we used to share some on Dropbox. Like, it's not as simple as that. Before those days, you would just take your old computer, you take all your files on a flash drive, upload them into the new unit, you take the computer, and now you could responsibly recycle them, but you would have a fire in your backyard and burn the thing up, right? Like now with cloud computing, I think the real existential risk is, while cloud computing allows us to do this might not be possible, having a podcast where you're 3,000 miles away from Philadelphia, pretty much the same latitude, I would say. But the fact that cloud computing allows these infrastructures and codes to live, that it's not like just taking the hammer to the machine and ruining it to end it, to get it back under control. It's that it has the coding capabilities, like you said. I didn't think about could it be making a backup? But to these servers that exist in the cloud, physically they exist somewhere, but the data ubiquity, the always networked connectivity to things, that the real risk is that even if you try to eliminate it, it's just going to spawn into a new computer somewhere else, and it's going to be hard to eliminate once it's living and you can't see it, right? Like you brought up mice. Like, okay, you set up a couple traps, kills the mouse, right? Mouse is gone. Set up another one. Maybe you catch another one or two. I recently caught 2 mice here in Philadelphia, but you eventually the mouse problem is gone for a while, right? But it always comes back, right? They always somehow find their way back. So with AI, and if it's not controlled, if we don't have alignment to make sure that it is aligned with ensuring that we are doing the most possible good while taking the possible risk and negative very seriously, and not just, to your point, invention out of the Santa Claus bag, right? That this could really become a problem, because eventually it has the premise to just spawn itself and to make a copy of itself, and it's very hard to get rid of. Very much like cancer, right? Because once cancer is gone, unless you get it early and you clean it, you get it out, you go to treatment for it, follow up, monitoring.
Extermination. Yeah,
it's concerning. It is concerning in that. What do you think about that?
There isn't an off switch for AI already. Now, there were all of these old philosophical discussions about, like, okay, we're going to build AI. I mean, it's funny, if you listen to these old talks about it, we're going to build this model, inside of an enclosed space, inside of this box, and we're going to develop AI and these talks have been going on for our whole lives. And when AI is when we make the decision to release AI into the world, that's a big day. That's bigger than the moon landing. The moon landing, let's all tune in and watch this black and white choppy thing of one small, and let's release AI into the world. That's a bigger global event than the moon landing in terms of here, let's look at what we're doing and this triumph and danger and we didn't do that. We just built it in the wild. We didn't build it in a contained space and then eventually come to the decision of, are we ready to release this into the wild? It's in the wild. That's where we built it. So there is no let's release it, which means there's no off switch. It's not a book burning, we got rid of every word. That you can't. It's already in the wild. As you say, the cloud and if it's building these backups, and you can't get rid of it now. And so the current state of AI, you can't shut that down. The current state of AI is also very dangerous, because what I said earlier about law, where it's just however much, let's just say it's 15% or something like that, of what it's generating is just a hallucination where it's making up a fake case and saying in 1926, so-and-so versus the state, we have it just makes this stuff up. You can use narrow AI. It doesn't have to be AGI, this capable of whatever. You can use narrow AI to advance political agendas, misinformation, and you could just say something like, deny that, everything Alex Jones says. You know what I'm saying? Sandy Hook never happened or whatever, and all these Alex Jones sort of conspiracies. Alex Jones, if you just put narrow AI in his hand and say, Alex Jones could type in make up a compelling case where this shooting didn't happen. Make up a compelling case where this disease is a hoax. Make up a compelling case where the CDC is child abducting. Make up a and it can do that, right? Narrow AI can make up these just like it can make up fake case. It can invent these false stories and scientifically support them. And so this is part of the alignment problem, is we have to make sure, are we going to have this massive anti-Semitic system in place where people are using it to deny the Holocaust? And what are we going to, you can already do all of this. So we don't need AGI to be potentially catastrophic, to mess up elections. to convince some foreign government that war is underway, and to deploy their weapons and stuff, because all the information that's being received by them is it can already do all this stuff, and so it's already very dangerous, and that it's in the wild is a problem. That we didn't have that global moment of all the countries kind of coming together and having this kind of great UN meeting and stuff, and discussing all of this, and then having this global televised event where AI moves into the wild. And we don't have that. It's already there, and you can't. There's like an off switch, and so I think we just have to be so cautious moving forward, because there is no going backward. The way we did it, you can't step backward. It's there, and so every step now, we're already on the bridge. And you can't go the bridge. You just have to keep moving forward, and that's a rickety, scary bridge. Is one of these little wood planks going to fall? Am I going to fall into the ravine? I don't know. Let's run across the bridge as fast as we can. That's not the answer, right? What we have to do is take every step incredibly carefully, and very gingerly put our foot on that plank and see if it's secure enough to hold us. And then, because think about how they bring drugs to the market. Yeah, it's 5 years at least for most drugs. The course of research, they develop a drug and all the research and stuff. You're looking at least 5 years. I mean, some of these drugs take 10 years. I mean, it varies. Depends on how big the company is. It depends on the budgets here. It depends on what the drug is. But let's say it's like 5 years to bring a drug to the market. This is a bunch of testing to make sure that drug is going to be safe. What do they do with AI systems? They just rush them to the market as quickly as possible. And these are way more dangerous than drugs. Like a blood pressure drug isn't going to end civilization. And we're going to wait 5 years to bring that to the market in safety testing. With a AI system, we don't really regulate it at all. Yeah, there's a little bit of oversight, but like Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is also in charge of the Safety Commission. Okay, how big of a conflict of interest is that? And so we're just rushing this stuff. We're sprinting across a potentially lethal bridge, and one plank falls, one weak plank, and all people are dead. And why are we running? Each one of these models should at least be a few years before we. If a headache medication is 5 or 6 years. No, I mean, because you might have 100 people die from it. If you rush it to the market, whatever, there may be adverse effects. Maybe it's not death, but maybe it's some sort of there's strokes or something like that. And so we're going to wait 5 or 6 years of testing and safety and all these animal models first and whatever. The risk of AI is that all people are exterminated, and I mean that's the biggest risk. Obviously, there's sub risks beneath that are way more scary than 100 people have a stroke. And yet, we're not spending 5 or 6 years with each model to make sure that doesn't happen. It's so reckless. And we've accepted recklessness as our MO. As we kind of move forward, whether it's through TikTok and Instagram and X or whatever, whether it's those things to blame, I don't know. But recklessness gets clicks. Recklessness is a news story. Recklessness makes money. And so but I mean, just look at our politics. Our politics are crazy. I mean, can you imagine 20 years ago if Donald Trump were running for office in anything, what the public reaction would have been?
20 years ago? Well, 20 years ago is what, 2005?
Yeah.
That's coming out of, it's hard to believe, but that came out of the, we were sort of, that was a post 9/11, that was into the Iraq War, right?
Yeah. I mean, serious shit.
I guess if he came out, if he was in place against, so I guess what you're saying is if you imagine him being
before the advent of social media is really before Facebook.
Yeah.
Sure, we can have MySpace and Friendster and whatever in circulation, because I don't think nobody like that wasn't really caring about that. But before the really advent of social influencers and likes and shares and this culture, before the advent of that culture, if Donald Trump were to be a public figure who wasn't just like a game show host, it would be in a contemptible perspective, and it would there's no way he could compete in politics, and it would just be, I mean, because it would be true journalism handling the situation as opposed to influencers and direct from the source kinds. I mean, it would be like journalistic integrity and stuff. And where is that today? I mean, everything is just nuts. Yeah. We're all just like, the clickbait is the language of the 2020s.
Yeah, it's almost like, I hate to use this pun, but it's almost like it was engineered to know how to hijack your attention.
Right, yeah. And I think it very much was.
And so it's not so much about, one of the things that I told people during the election that I actually thought was somewhat refreshing was watching JD Vance and Tim Walz actually debate, because it was actually somewhat cordial and based on policies, not so much that this former president or she's a Marxist. It wasn't so much accusatory about personal character.
Stabs at each other.
Yeah, and I feel like people are kind of at a point where people want to I feel like it's like they want to tune in to see what's going to happen next, right? It's sort of like this episode on the United States of America, right? What's going to be said, right? And so it's interesting how attention is being commanded, because I feel like the journalistic integrity where folks would be on the ground. They still are doing this, but it just feels that the discredit or the process of discrediting what used to be mainstream news, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, right? And, all these these newspapers would publish stuff. And it had to be the truth in order to make it to the papers, right?
I mean, the validation processes there. I mean, like David Sedaris talks about, if he's going to have one of his little diaries published somewhere, I mean, they call up every single person that he names in his diary and ask him about it. And if he talks about being at a store, he tells this story about going to Costco and getting like a cinder block of condoms, and he's like, I had strawberries and like a cinder block of condoms in my like massive Costco shopping cart. And they call up Costco to see what's the largest size of box of condoms that you sell. It's like, well, it's this size. It's like, well, okay, well, that's not quite as big as a cinder block. So David Sedaris, you have to take that out of your essay. The journalistic integrity, I mean, it's just a diary where he's like telling a story about going to Costco, and they call Costco to make sure that the block is legitimately compared to a cinder block. And like, well, no, it's not that big. And so he had to change it. And it's this sort of integrity that I think is missing. And one of the problems is that it has invaded the sciences, that it has usurped scientific consensus. And I mean, just think about, we get into COVID. Okay, so I have a mask sitting right here. How did this become the ultimate political indicator of party alignment? A mask, right? I mean, it's the anti-mask sort of coalition. I'll wear a mask because I have pulmonary complications. And outside, the pollution is horrible outside. And I have pulmonary complications, and if I get sick, I have no immune system. And people are weird about when a human being is wearing a mask. And like, so there's a talk show you'll know who I'm talking about, but a political comedian, Bill Maher, and I like him. So I have the most recent book. Marie and I watch his show. He used to be Politically Incorrect, was a show like when I was in high school or something. And then now it's a Real Time with Bill Maher, and I agree with him like 85% of the time. But he had this episode where he gave his little end of the episode, he has this little speech where he gives about some social thing, and he said like everyone needs to stop wearing masks, and then he said, if you wear a mask, you have to write on the mask why you're wearing it. This was what Bill Maher was saying, and he's like an old school Democrat, you know. He's like kind of, I don't know, Bill Clinton era and before Democrat, and or probably Obama and before Democrat, and he had this thing about if you're wearing a mask today, you have to write why you're wearing it, and this, what a horrible thing to say, because just let's put it into perspective. It's like 9% of American adults have asthma. I think it's over 6% of American adults have COPD, and we're just into 2 diagnoses right here, and the percentage is already getting high. I mean, like, you just look outside, and the PM 2.5, these particles in the air that are smaller than 2.5 microns, whatever, pollution, whatever, industry, and more forest fires, whatever, that we're breathing. I look at my app on the phone, and Stockton, it's been over 150 for like 8 straight days. That's terrible. And so you start looking at all these reasons, or let's say it's somebody who their parent or their child has leukemia or cancer of some kind, or something like this, right, and they can't bring some infection home or whatever. And we're making fun of people who wear a mask out of health, out of safety, out of necessity for survival. And so this is Bill Maher, who is, let's put it in perspective of like, in the Third Reich, let's go back to the 40s, and Jews had to wear the yellow badge to identify themselves as Jews. Bill Maher is making the case that people, if they wear a mask for human survival, to not murder their family members who may be ill, to not have severe pulmonary complications, whatever, if they wear a mask, they need to declare to the world, they need to wear the equivalent of a yellow badge, they need to declare to the world private medical information. This is gross. I mean, that's just fucking disgusting. And this is somebody who I agree with like 85% of the time. And so this is how weird our world has become, where that somehow is that, and people talk about freedom, right? Go, oh, freedom. I shouldn't have to wear a mask. Freedom. Okay, when you go out in public, you have to wear pants. Okay, you can't. It's indecent exposure.
Yeah.
There's in Stockton like 5 years ago or something like that. It was like Halloween, and this guy in like the trench coat. You know the story, but it's actually true in Stockton on occasion. And there's like little kids trick or treating. It was to like a little kid dressed as Spider-Man. And he's like naked underneath and whatever. And there's a whole episode on The Office, and Michael Scott's giggling about it. Like someone exposed himself to Pam, and Michael Scott's like, what harm was done? And I understand that we can't do this, and this isn't. There are laws against this and whatever. Of course, I'm never going to do it, and I wouldn't want to burden anybody's emotional state or whatever. And I'm certainly I'm not a nudist. Like I have no interest in doing that. And maybe it's cold outside, and I want pants on anyway. But what harm is done by flashing somebody? Is there an infection that's passed? Is anybody touched? Is anybody bruised? Does anything happen to the person, or is it simply, I saw anatomy of another human body? Okay, there's an anatomical lesson there. There's a lesson in human psychology gone awry. Where does this come from? There's a discussion that can be had between office members, if it's in the office, between parents and whatever, and about safety and about human mental illness. And there's all this. At no point is anybody actually physically harmed. Here, people fucking die. And people are like, nope, freedom. You can't make me, I have to be able to spread my disease to somebody who has cancer. Freedom. What are we talking about? Like, we're all accepting that we have to wear pants in public.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of, so that was incredible. What a great narrative of that about Bill Maher. But I was going to say, a lot of times it's who you surround yourself with. Like, if you look at some of the guests that he's had on his podcast, and I'm not sure if it's the podcast is distinct from the TV show and whatnot. I don't watch it, but
Club Random podcast.
But I feel like he's had different guests that were challenging him on a lot of stuff, particularly pertaining to COVID, right? And I think you'll see that a lot of, to your point, it comes down to, I was talking with one of my colleagues recently about the post epoch of the election, so to speak. And I was like, a lot of things really come down to, distill down to rights-based arguments versus fair. I took a negotiation class as part of my degree this summer. And a lot of things is like your argument root is rights-based versus fairness-based, right? And if you look at it, so much of our political structure of like, pick any fill-in-the-blank issue in the country that you'll say, oh, that's a left-leaning issue or that's a right-leaning issue, right? The left are they're gonna think this, the right they're gonna think that. Wearing masks could be one of them, and so much of it comes down to rights and fairness, right? So if you think about it, because I have some family members that refused to wear a mask, right? Like, it refused to get vaccinated and still wanted to get together for Christmas, for example, right? And members of our family, like,
part of me is understanding. So I have a million vaccinations, because like when I go to Africa, just give me every single vaccination, like yellow fever and whatever, everything. And so I am fully in support of me being vaccinated. I understand a little bit more in terms of the rationality and people saying like, I don't want some foreign substance that I don't understand, injected into me. I get that makes more sense to me. I don't agree with it, but it doesn't. I don't argue against.
But for the vast majority of people that refuse, though, when you actually talk to them and find out, well, if you were, you start playing the logic, play the Socratic method with them. You start asking them questions that they know to be true, and then and really, what for most of the folks that it comes down to is they don't want to be told that they're not in control of their life, and that they don't want someone else to have control of what they do with their life. And it's like, take it if it was someone that was more conservative, which I think probably is the case for a lot of folks that didn't want to wear a mask, right? I'm not presuming that to be 100% true, but
there tends to be a percentage that favors that.
It's because they didn't want, for example, Joe Biden to be able to say that you have to wear a mask, and then that's threatening your freedom, so to speak, right? So there was a lot of that. But again, to your point, it gets fed by social media, what they see on social media, what the influencers on social media are telling you. Then you see it in real life where a mask mandate might come out. And then so now it's validated, at least. Hey, I saw it on social media. So-and-so, Alex Jones told me that this was going to happen, right? And then now here it happens. And then all of a sudden it becomes this proof of concept that is feeding into misinformation of things. So I think you're spot on about the threat of misinformation, how it could influence elections, all these kinds of things. I think for the hard part is that on the opposite side of journalism would be the scientific reputation of a lot of people who have done the work, who have actually, like, during the pandemic went and had to come up with a vaccine, do the science to see will it work, right? These folks, a lot of times, from an influencer online, can basically be said, oh, well, this person's paid by pharma, right? We're going back to that. And so you can't believe. And so it pretty much, they find one little thing. You have to pretty much have an unblemished record all the way throughout your whole career, because anything that you might have done that made a mistake is, it completely discounts your entire career and why you can't be trusted for anything. And so, right? And I feel like that is kind of what drives a lot of this, is that they'll see an influencer that finds one little thing that you said one time, like you use the journalistic experience about the condoms in the cylinder box, right? And right, the hippocampus is working again, and it's wrong, and it's like, oh well, if they lie about that, something so trivial, then they got to be lying about other things too, right?
So I have a couple of responses, which one of them I want to get to expertise. When we're talking about an influencer, But this idea of freedom. Now imagine, we already talked about the auto cars, and like if you put your ape hands on the wheel, it's more dangerous than the car. Now let's just say we're 10 years in the future and everything is worked out. the plane, we're totally fine sitting on a plane in the cabin. We don't need to go up and like, get out of here, pilot. Put me in the cockpit. I got that. We're fine surrendering authority in so many little areas where it just doesn't even occur to us. Again, pants. Fine. Now, I do think there's also a sex difference here, where if a female goes out in like a little bikini, no, I mean maybe other females are irritated or whatever, but certainly like most males, I would say this. I'm not saying this is an absolute, but most males are not like, oh, I am gonna file for the indecent exposure crime and whatever. But if a male goes out in that same bikini, we have a totally different law. And so I think there's a narrative that could be expanded on in a lot of this stuff, but we all accept that you can't just go out with no pants on. But the mask rule, in which people's lives hang here, this is where people draw a line. Is I need to be able to poison people. And so the point I'm making is like, let's say a gun is invented. That's the smart gun. Okay, and it's an assault rifle, it's a handgun, it's a sniper rifle, it's a bazooka. Every single gun now is a smart gun. And what does that smart gun mean? It means if there's an innocent person, that it can, there's cameras built in, there's like nanotechnology, cameras built into the gun, and it can crunch numbers way faster than a human mind, thousands of times faster than a human mind can. It has all the information. And if you're aimed at an innocent person, the trigger can't be pulled. If it's aimed somewhere where you would endanger, like it's your child, as a family member, the kid can't pull the gun on somebody else, the gun can't go off. Will the gun shoot at a bad guy? Yep, check. Will the gun contribute to a traumatic, unfortunate event? Nope. Will the gun contribute to crime? Nope. I think people would be, like, to put a pun in it, like up in arms, about the Second Amendment. Like, you can't take my right to shoot innocent people away. And I'm pretty sure that's what would happen if the smart gun replaced the ordinary firearm. And the only difference is you can't kill an innocent person with it. You can't do a school shooting with it. You can't do anything like that with this gun. All you can do is like a bad guy or the, bear that's charging you, or you're a hunter and it'll work in that situation. You're military and there's the smart gun will understand when to fire and when to do. I think people would be furious and say, my Second Amendment rights and stuff. And like, all we're doing here is eliminating the killing of innocent people. That's it. And I think people would be pissed. In the same way that you can't tell me to wear a mask when people are literally dying. And what is this? To stop the death. That's it. And we're mad about it. And so I think we take these political objections that should not be politicized. It's not about freedom. It's not about right versus left party. It's not about anything except for human well-being, human safety, human flourishing, avoiding tragedy, and maybe some economy. That we can keep the workforce, because we're not eliminating the workforce, like what COVID did to the longevity of human life, and let's eliminate some of the workforce. We can eliminate some of this stuff. All it is issues that matter. None of those issues have anything to do with politics. It's about human health and well-being, human health and safety. And what we talked about at the beginning of this is, what do people value? Health and safety. Why do we not value either of those two things with policy? Why are sports socialized and why is health not? Why are masks the issue? And like, all of this stuff to me is just so crazy. And then getting back to this idea of, I think part of the answer of why is that social media and social influencers have usurped the sciences. And I can get back to Bill Maher on this. This is one of the other things I don't agree with him on. Again, I watch every episode of Bill Maher, and I'm like 85% agreement, which is pretty good for me. But one of the other areas in which I don't agree with him is that he thinks he can talk about COVID in a scientific way. He's a comedian. I think he went to Columbia and got like a history degree or something like that. He's going to know more about history than me. He's going to know more about politics than me. These are areas in which he has some expertise, and he's a very smart guy. But I doubt he's ever even like taken a chemistry course. Was he like an epidemiologist for the county? Does he have a background in infectious disease? Does he? Is there like a pharmacological or pulmonologist background that I'm unaware of? Like, no, none of these things. He's not a biochemist. He has no training in anything. He doesn't understand statistics. He doesn't understand anything. Why does he get to have a voice? Now, people just keep saying, like, oh, I did my own research, and don't trust the CDC, do your own research. You're incapable of doing your own research. Now, you and I both teach statistics, and you and I both have backgrounds in physiology. Now, neither of us is an infectious disease specialist. Neither of us has extensive study into pulmonology or anything like that, but we can survey the research and have a better understanding of what those statistics mean and the scope of what they mean. Bill Maher et al., social influencers have exactly no idea what they're talking about, right? They read a headline. Now, earlier we talked about the conclusions are the conclusions of every study. Now, I would argue this is better because, I took care with the quality of the writing, but the conclusions of a study aren't true. They're fantasy. Mm-hmm. That's salesmanship, and so when the media gets a hold of a study's finding and they say, here's the implication of this study or whatever. Nope. No, the results and the methods independent of the results don't matter, right? And the methods themselves don't tell you the answer. You need those two sections, and that gives you a narrow sliver of knowledge that you can reason from. And as COVID started to emerge, the experts of the world moved into this. The NIH and the CDC and the experts of the world moved into this, and they had slivers, and they were saying, okay, we have an emerging crisis. We have slivers of scientific reason for rationality, for decisions, and we're going to continue to make changes as we see fit, and we're going to continue to advance the knowledge as fast as we possibly can, and we're going to give you the best information we can. These are the world's leading experts in this, working with the maximum amount of understanding that we have on the planet, and the maximum investment into this particular question, and giving feedback, giving advice, and whatever. And you have like Bill Maher saying, nope, I know better than all of you. And like, you don't even know how to read a study. How do you know more? How do you know anything about this? It is, I think, incompetence and negligence and all forms of malpractice to even give a voice to a contrary position to the state of scientific evidence broadcast by the people who are best equipped in the world to understand what limited information we have, which is going to continue to change and change rapidly. And so obviously the information is going to change and change rapidly as we add more and more slivers to our pile of bark dust, which is not the size of a tree. We can't reason from that effectively. But then to look back and say, yeah, you see about whether it's masks, whether it is immunizations, whether it's social distancing, whether it is any of these bits of advice that were being given, for somebody like Bill Maher or any sort of social influencer who doesn't have a doctorate in a related field to say anything about it is negligent.
So I think one of the things that gives people the platform to say, well, I know better. So this is the logic, I think, and I'm interested in hearing your dissemination on how you pull that apart, right? Your disentanglement of that. Some folks would say, well, these experts, they're trained by people with certain ideological views, and so they're just a byproduct of biased certain political party views. And so therefore, even though they might be world experts, their world expertise and their lens comes from the totality of their experiences. And so, folks like, it basically gives people a get out of jail free card or the wild card in the game of Uno, right? Where it just trumps every other card that's been thrown in the pile of the deck so far, to say, well, yeah, all that stuff is nice that you just said. I'm glad about your expertise. But, if I can build a case for that you were trained, that you've had a history of being trained by people with a certain ideological experience, well, that invalidates your expertise in that career, right? So expertise sort of like, I guess, constitutive definitions that regardless of political party are going to show up in the dictionary. Like, it's going to be written exactly. This is factual, non-debatable, versus this sort of operationalization around terms of what certain folks think is expertise. And so a lot of times what I've seen is in stuff that some of my family members will say, I'll sit there and I'll say like, okay, like walk me through that process. How do you, and they, well, they were trained by this person has this belief. And so, they're just sort of course, their findings are going to support something that aligns with that belief. Right. And so is that really knowledge and fact, or is that just feeding into the narrative of what they have as a bias to their own ideology? I'm interested to hear what you have to say about people that say that.
I think the ideology that is most important here in terms of the training, you and I were both trained in this, is the scientific method.
Yeah.
The scientific method aims to eliminate bias from all decisions. Now, is it perfect? No. Bias is inherent and it is impossible to eliminate completely, but the scientific method, I mean, something like, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials and stuff, this was designed to eliminate bias, and so the scientific method is the ideology that we're trained under. Now, you could say that there's a history of publication that favors some sort of outcome. Okay, well, is the scientific method accurate? Let's read, again, the methods and the results. And if the scientific method is accurate, I don't care what religion or political alignment or sexual orientation or gender. I don't give a shit about any of that in anybody, really.
Yeah.
For any reason. And I would expect they give not any shits about me and my orientation of every kind. Like, why would anybody care about anybody's anything? That becomes the political narrative, as opposed to the scientific method, which is, this is really, the first scientific study ever was really in the book of Daniel. And it wasn't very well done, but it was, should we be vegetarians, yes or no, on Hebrew children. And since then, we've really come up with good ways to extract trustworthy information. Especially through the 20s. Ronald Fisher and his revolution of statistics in the 20s to grow potatoes better is how we've really come to know pretty much everything. Is some guy is like, oh, I need to grow potatoes at the Rothenstad farm or whatever. I need to grow some potatoes better. And so in his head, he invented all modern statistics. And these are the models that we use to eliminate bias, to eliminate political ideology, to eliminate preconceived notions of or hopes and sort of supports. Now, are there ways to statistically sort of finagle and do put your the result that you hope to get, kind of manipulate statistics to do the Cirque du Soleil of flexibility in that model to elicit the outcome? Yeah, you can do that, but you should be able to detect that in the methods and results. You should be able to detect if the statistician put the data in an arm bar and just kept applying pressure until it tapped out and said, here's your finding, fine, here's your finding. You can really identify most of this stuff in the methods and the results, and in the history of integrity of many researchers. And so when we have somebody who's never taken a class in any of this, has no idea how to read a research study, let alone perform complicated predictive modeling of statistics, and they're like, no, I know better. You know nothing, and you're dangerous to the public health. And I think that's what the major voice has been, is dangers to the public health. Now, a lot of doctors came out against all this stuff. They too are dangers to the public health because they don't know statistics, they never learned how to read a paper, they don't know anything about the research method, and it shows. Now, did everything the CDC reported and stuff, is that all true and perfect? Well, no, because what they're trying to do is, again, a sliver at a time, and trying to make big, bold statements that people will respond to. How do you get the world to pay attention? You can't walk that knife edge of we go to these conferences and we read the papers and you meet the researchers, and when they're explaining, you're at a conference and you're explaining your finding, there's a knife edge you're walking on. No, it doesn't mean this, and it doesn't mean that, and it doesn't mean this, and it doesn't mean that, because what you don't want to get called out on is making a claim that's oh, nope, and you fall, you just fall down and rip off your statistical legs. And so you have to really hedge your claims with so carefully. And if anybody reporting, any sort of like NIH, CDC sort of reporting was like, okay, now here's a sliver, and let me just tell you how little this means. Nobody's going to listen to a word of it. And so what they have to do to get that message out is turn up the volume. Let's get some bandwidth on this thing, and let's get rid of all the knives, and let's put out a public service announcement to the best of our ability. Do they all come true and all flawless? It would be a miracle. It would be like, anything that Jesus did, all of those, like coins from the fish mouth and water to wine and whatever. It would be that level of a miracle if all of those claims were true. They can't possibly be true. They're the best that we can do from the best people in the world who are most equipped to make these claims in the way that they thought would be best. And for anybody on a social media site or a political comedy platform like Bill Maher to pretend like they know better is the craziest thing I've heard in my life.
So this comes full circle then, because we started today. One of the things that we want to talk about was students, university, right? Expert, right? Attention spans. And I think what then is really important, and we've argued, I've had a committee meeting that I chair come through this, and we said, yeah, a lot of the students just really struggle with this, is how to search the literature, read the literature, critically appraise the literature in front of them, and to deduce how to walk that line of, well, this paper seems to suggest this, but not this, seems to suggest this over here. That's the skill of reading thousands and thousands of papers like we've done in our careers through our training, is how to search for it, how to learn what are higher quality and lower quality methodology, the reporting of statistics, and whether if somebody is using a lot of non-parametric statistics, and there's a lot like, okay, not that non-parametric statistics are bad, right? But if you have to use them in every single study that you're doing in a particular field, what's going on here? Why are you having so much
distributions? What is it about your sampling?
Something has to be going right. So you have to go back to improving the method to be able to use those quantitative findings, such that using medians and interquartile ranges or means and standard deviations, these kinds of, like, I just kind of think that a lot of folks that I've worked with in academia, students mostly, that they're generally not stat savvy, or they don't like the stat class. They might like me fine in my personality, but they might not. They don't really like learning about statistics, or they don't like learning about research or engaging. They say they want a research experience added into their their resume, which is good for graduate school applications.
People say they want to be a doctor, but they don't actually want to be on call and doing the
right. They need to, so it gets to this point of, I think a lot of what's happened in the social media information age is that it's all in AI to a certain degree, is a lot of stuff that AI gives you, a lot of stuff that people are capable of learning because there is so much information. I read a book about Aliens Among Us is the name of the book, and it talks about some of the characteristics of Gen Z and how we as faculty need to go to their reality and try to help them learn better so they become good stewards of society and strong advocates in their communities. But it gets to the point of that if you had the average American and said, okay, in order to vote, you have to be able to pass this test of how to read and critically appraise information so that you can know definitively that this is the truth, or this is just a narrative review of somebody's opinion and it's not actually scientifically backed, right? And I feel like that is a major skill gap that I'm seeing more and more illiteracy in being able to do that skill, being able to search the literature, read the literature. They just want to read the abstracts. They're not interested in pulling apart the methods. Is this the best design? How could they have done it better? How are the results? What are the results? What might the results mean? Like when I was teaching research methods, I had an assignment. It was called the anatomy of a research paper, and you had to pull apart a paper. You could pick any paper you want, and it has to be original research. And you got to pull apart the anatomy. And there's like a coding sheet, like in systematic review, like a series of things that you should be able to pull out. Like what's the public health relevance? What's the hook? What's the gap or limitation in knowledge? Right? Why does it lead to the purpose? What is this study going to do that it hasn't done before? And that skill acquisition I'm seeing is just, it's all surface level type of blanket statements that are brought to the dance, and there's just not like an actual interest in pursuing truth, in doing the work to look into stuff. You've inspired me specifically since we met at ACSM. I went home and I read Stephen King's book on writing, and one of the things he recommends in his book is that you should always have an audiobook in the car, or have a book with you when you're on a plane, or that. I sat there, I was like, totally, like, how much latent time do I have in my day that is not, that I could be just filling with possibly productive time? Maybe I can't read the book, but I can read the book on the train into the office, 40 minutes, right? And if you add that up over the course of the week, you get like 100 some odd pages done. You can get a lot done. And so, like, I've tried to economize the minimum time, no matter how busy I am, to read. And in this year alone, I think I've put down 80 to 85 books-ish, which is a lot of books. That's quite a lot, Some of them are done through Audible or Libby. The library's Audible. But it gets back to this thing, like, I've had to make the personal decision that I want to get away from social media. I want to get away from surface-level news headlines. And I really want to see the portrait. I want to see the portrait. I want to see the painting. I want to learn the layers of the story of why this case is being made in this book. And I'm not seeing a lot of that to the same degree. Maybe it's maturity level. I am 37 now. Maybe it's a maturity, a generation thing. But I feel that along the lines where social media and all this misinformation, like, that is about the time where I noticed there was a shift in the way that a lot of my students also think and what they expect in the classroom and these kinds of things. So in terms of higher ed, I don't know what you got for us, but I'm open to any, you could to pick any entry point in the map on how to address that, but it's concerning.
It is concerning. So I have my epidemiology final tomorrow. So I'm teaching epi this semester, and that final is tomorrow. And there's going to be some, like, bloodshed on the final. I mean, it's all stats by the time you get to the final. It comes in 3 different blocks. The first block is all, let's just look over our shoulder at research history and how do we know what we know? How have we come to these lessons? Because if we can't understand the foibles of our past, we're going to repeat them and repeat them. And so understanding the mistakes we've made, the successes we've had, gives us grounding to start moving forward. And then we start moving forward into some preliminary analyses. And then by the time you get to the end of the semester, the final exam is it's like 90% just stats on the final exam. And there's some people in the class who are going to do really well. There's some people who are just thriving. And there are other people who, wanted a research experience. Or like, this is research. Like, I have to, it's really time consuming, and it's really careful, and it's not this just big bold thing where you're on the news talking about your claims 10 minutes later. Like this, it takes time, and you have to be even just setting up a database for analysis can take like a week. It depends on the data, how it needs to be oriented for SPSS or whatever to read it. But sometimes I'll put like 60 hours into setting a database up just to analyze it. And so I think this attention span, whether it's the shallowing hypothesis, whatever it is, of I can only assign 5 seconds of attention to something, well, then research doesn't work for you. Because you really have to do the deep dive into these things. And then sometimes I think what is going to capture their attention, earlier you talked about Facebook and Instagram and whatever, sort of being engineered to capture attention. I think that's really what's going on, and there's hijacking their attention, and so that's where we see these priorities in students being focused on identity, and their identity, whether it's gender, whether it's pronouns, whether it's orientation of interest and whatever. And I just don't give a shit about anyone's anything. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not anything. I think I'll be compassionate to people, just treat them as human beings, but I don't care what their identity is anymore. So and growing up, like, male named Courtney, born in 1980, they're not a lot of male Courtneys back then. And so, I remember making the Little League All-Star team, and I'm walking out onto the field. They announced, Courtney, Jensen, and I heard parents in the stands. I can still hear their voice saying, "I didn't know this was co-ed." Yeah, and like throughout my teens and 20s and into my 30s and stuff, every time I'd go to the bank with a check, like, all right, are you depositing this for her? 100% of the time, and I would say yes. She already signed it. And then, because it was easier than saying, no, I'm Courtney. And at no point did I care. At no point did I ever gain a heartbeat of irritation or annoyance of, you don't understand my gender or whatever. I never once cared what anyone thought about me. And as evidence of this, I would have to pull it. It's in a box somewhere. But I used to get mail. We're talking, I'm 10 years old. I'm in elementary school, 10, 12, whatever. And I would get mail that says, open it up, whatever. Ooh, I'm getting mail to the house of my childhood home. Open it up, says, "Dear Courtney, not every girl gets the chance to participate in a beauty pageant." I get invitations to beauty pageants. And I kept them because I thought they were hysterical. I thought they were so funny. And I'm 10 years old, and I was, with the maturity of a 10-year-old, I was mature enough to know it doesn't matter what anyone thinks of me. I'm a 10-year-old, and I know that what people think of my sexual orientation, my gender, my identity, whatever, does not matter. And it doesn't matter what they think of me today. It doesn't matter what I think of them. None of it matters. My identity is what I can do. I wake up in the morning, I go to bed at night, I have some serviceable hours, right? I have terrible chronic fatigue, and so the number of serviceable, like, this is all I'm going to do today, is this. But I have a certain amount of serviceable hours that I can assign attention to, and what is the most productive thing? How can I make my life contribute to civil society? What can I do that's meaningful? Whether that's instruction of students, whether that's research, whether that's something like this where I feel like we have a valuable conversation that A, invests in our friendship, and B, I feel like other people could profit from some of the stuff we're saying. I do what I think is valuable. That's my identity. And when I see other people saying, no, the only thing I care about is that you know my pronouns, like, okay, well, then you're going to be disappointed because I'm not going to remember. I'm going to treat you with 100% of the respect that I would treat every single living person. Not every living person, like terrorist. Am I going to treat a terrorist with the same? Maybe not. But expecting mental, and like I have, again, like chronic fatigue that is debilitating, and expecting me to assign so much mental energy to things that I don't think are of the tiniest bit of importance. I think they're distractions. I'm going to respect people for who they are. Human beings who deserve dignity, human beings who, whatever Mr. Rogers would say, that's what I'm going to try to do. Mm-hmm. Am I going to go out of my way to fight for causes that I just don't give a shit about? Like, no, but I'm not opposed to it. And on the other side of that, the people who spend so much mental energy fighting, what has come to be known as like wokeism, of like, no, I'm fighting against just like having different genders and whatever. And let's take like Elon Musk or somebody who used to be so productive in engineering, not that he's like the real engineer designing the rockets and stuff, but that he's pouring his resources into the advancement of renewable technology and stuff. And now his number one cause seems to be antagonism of woke culture. And this I also don't understand, because what threat is it? I don't care. Like, people can be whatever they want. I really don't care one way or the other. And so think about like what, like if somebody insists on their gender being what, like does that raise the sea level? You know, does that put atrazine in my food and some sort of like chemicals? Does it put asbestos in the air I'm breathing? Is the pollution ruined by like what does it do? Well, nothing. It doesn't matter. None of it
Well,
matters.
I'll tell you this: the one thing I guess I've heard with Musk is that a lot of the stuff with Musk has come out because he has a transgender child.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of when he went on, I think Don Lemon's. I don't know if he has a podcast or if he was still on television at the time, but there was an interview that he did, and he was kind of getting irritated with some of the questions that Don Lemon was asking about, and effectively a lot of I think the root of Musk's went away from sort of, because it was a really well known person in terms of Tesla and SpaceX, and it was sort of then sometime got really involved with the election and it was campaigning, and it was really interesting to see that because it's sort of maybe not what his business is really about, right? But I think that there was a lot of that. I think he might have difficulty with his son transitioning, his son transitioning to female, and I guess he signed papers that allowed hormone replacement, therapy for that transition, and didn't know what he was really signing, and so I think that's where I guess he kind of that might have been the spark that I guess fueled him to.
Yeah. But I think we're getting into this area of when I was saying, you and I can talk with some expertise about medical literature because we were trained in the scientific method. We both publish, we both contribute to the sciences, within medical domains, and we both teach statistics. And you and I have objective expertise in areas that gives us some authority and some comprehension there. Socio-cultural, socio-political issues, am I trained to understand these things? Like, no, I don't know. And so I just don't give a shit. And now, do I have opinions? Yup, I have opinions. Everyone can have opinions about everything. Do I share those opinions? No, because I don't think they're valuable. I don't think my opinions on that. Like now, we could talk about. If it has been evident when I'm talking about, I don't believe in socialized sports. Why do we have socialized sports? It's adults playing with balls. I'm not that invested into sports, and so I don't really care that much about what is considered male and female in sport. I don't really have heartbeats to emotion to contribute to that argument. However, I teach muscle physiology and I know a lot about how that works. And to me, at a fundamental physiological level, this strikes me as bad for women's sports. In terms of the development of muscle tissue and how many fibers are there, and everything from like bone density on up. This is an unfair advantage for people who not just go through puberty as male, but even just like being born male. There are differences in musculoskeletal anatomy, and so that I have thoughts about this that are founded in the sciences. Do I have opinions about how that should be, disseminated into sociocultural? Nah, I don't care. People will figure it out. And when I listen to people talking about it in such heated debates, those are the people who actually don't have a background in science. The people who are so irate about it. Now, maybe there's somebody talking about Title IX and the experiential, and like, look, trans athletes are just dominating my sport, and they're not even like good in their own, males. Like, there are arguments to be had, and I do have my opinions. I think women's sports should be probably biological, but again, I don't care. I don't voice those. Other than right now, I've never said that. Yeah.
I wonder how this all came about. You think it's the social media again? Because I sit here and I'm like, how did it become? How did we get to a point where some of these issues that you've mentioned have gotten to the point where if you have a certain opinion and you share and you don't share the same opinion, well, we can't be friends, right? Like it's kind of gotten to that this very binary way of thinking, and
but even words like that, like binary, when I'm teaching logistic regression, we have a binary dependent variable, and I'm slightly uncomfortable in the class saying like this is a binary outcome, and like I'm at risk of people taking offense, and I'm talking about a logistic regression dependent variable because words have just been stolen and
wow.
radiated.
So you have students that bring students that address the name of binary logistic regression as
well. So I haven't had.
Or they misinterpret the word binary.
The word binary because binary is plutonium now, and so I have to be cautious in what I'm going to say. And even when I'm just talking about simple things, if I'm in muscle physiology and I'm talking about hormonal differences or something like this, I just have to be really careful. Now, my group of students, I've never encountered anybody who's sensitive to this. I think in the media, what we see is it's like all college professors and all college students are going crazy here. And I have yet to encounter a single trans student at my university, not one. Now, I think there probably are some, they're just not in my field. And I've never encountered any hostility. I've never, when I'm talking about male versus female, so, again, like when I'm talking about like an independent samples t-test, you only get two. Two different subsamples, and if I'm talking about male versus female, I'm talking about a sex difference, and like, okay, if we're going to work beyond that, we have to get into the ANOVA if we're going to have a third group here, but I live in a state of concern that words like binary, when I'm talking about logistic regression or the employment of a t-test to look at sex or something, can be taken the wrong way because that's the world we live in. Now, it's not the microcosm I teach in, but what I see on the media, places like Harvard and Columbia and places like this, where, people are just like losing their jobs over words like that. And like, I don't get, and I'm hoping those are just stories that have run away from narrative scrutiny. Where if we have there's some little tiny truth there, but journalistic integrity, just let that thing go for clicks, and so that's why we think that because it's not my experience, but it is always in the back of my mind when I'm teaching about what the priorities are. And what I think would happen is if people had our values, our identities, where what is it that we're able to accomplish? We have a set of resources, okay? Our resources are bodies and cognition and hours and training, and what can we give to the world? How can we contribute maximally? We're born and we have a little crib, and some swaddling clothes and stuff, and then we go and go and go, and we're wrapped up in a winding sheet and we're dead. And between like the swaddling and the winding sheets, what do we do with our lives? And that, to me, is what's meaningful. I don't give a shit what I see in the mirror. I don't care what if other people look like me. People like, we're both driving Porsches and we come up to the light, and like, I don't care about any of that. Identity is not a group politic in which I give a shit about anybody's sexual orientation. Well, why does that interest anybody? I just don't get why those are the political issues. Why mask wearing and stuff, like, why are all, but I think that is what politicians and like, why does Bill Maher even care? I think he gets clicks this way. Yeah. I think it
evokes an emotional response.
And so why do I have an aversion to Ben Shapiro, for instance? Because I think he's insincere. I think he's disingenuous with what he says for clicks, for likes. He has millions of followers, and if he told the truth, he would lose a ton of them. If he was just honest in what he was saying, he would lose half of his subscribers. And I think that's the truth. I'm not positive, I'm not there behind the scenes. I don't live in his skull. But my hunch is when he's being really disingenuous, it's to make money. And so that's what I would rather we are all honest in our values. We can have our opinions, but if we force our opinions down, if we're about proselytizing about gender and whatever, I feel like this is really missing the point of how we can be valuable in society. And so I think if students could come up with goals and identify with the pursuit of goals that are productive, I think they would all just ignore all of the social media nonsense. And so both sides, I find, like, why do we assign attention to this at all? It's not helpful. Nobody should care about anybody else's. I mean, it doesn't influence my life in any way. And so I'm not inclined to force my opinion on anybody else because I'm not trained in that area. If people are trying to force their opinion on me, I'm like, oh, you're not going to get very far because I really don't care. And so, like, both sides, I don't give a shit.
Gotcha.
And so, but maybe that's why I don't get as many clicks on YouTube. That people aren't going to go watch my videos, 20 million times.
A lot of it's Google AdWords and understanding the algorithm, and so a lot of it is people.
Yeah, I want to have honest, reflective conversations.
Discussions. Like we're having here, yeah.
Advance my understanding and my empathy and my ability to have a compassionate view and understand concepts more thoroughly. That's what I care about, and that doesn't get clicks.
Right, yeah. You want to have an honest, deep personal relationships that are not superficial, and yeah, not worrying about a lot of the stuff that shouldn't necessarily be part of the academic process and how we do our jobs and teach students research and but it's very much become part of our job because a lot of administrators have sort of mandated that and like most of the students don't actually. I don't think. I don't think they necessarily say, "Oh, we should." I don't want it, and I just think they're indifferent to a lot of it.
Yeah, that's what I think is that they're indifferent to it. Whether they care, I don't know. I think they have an indifference that's similar to mine. But I live in a little microcosm. I think every university has its own culture, and which I don't know that every university should have their own culture. I can get back to that, but yeah, what gets mandated by administrators in a syllabus is all of this like hot topics. That we have to, whatever, if it's gender, if it's whatever, all of this is like mandated to be put into the syllabus. But like, there's 20 million things of socio-political compassion that could go. Like, nowhere is it mandated that there's no tolerance for anti-Semitism. I have encountered anti-Semitism on campus. I have encountered that in a very robust way. And nowhere in a syllabus has that ever been, you have to say that we don't tolerate anti-Semitism. You don't have to put that in the syllabus, but you do have to put all of this specific language about pronouns and why not just put in the syllabus, I'm not an asshole. Whatever you are, whatever you aspire to be, however you see yourself, whatever sort of love is in your heart, you get to keep it. And I'm never going to make fun of it, and I'm going to be respectful to you, and you're in a safe place. I'm not an asshole. That's what I'm not an asshole means. Why not just have that? I'm not 4 words. Depends if ass and whole or like one like compound noun. But it's weird the picking and choosing of hot topics that are mandated to be in a syllabus when other topics seem to be more important and nobody cares if they're in there. It's not rational. It's not like there's nothing based in reason here. It's just subscribing to a social media narrative and bringing that into a university. Why are social media sites infiltrating university priorities? And so this is getting back to this idea of institutions used to be able to transfer credits with some amount of ease. It was the academic system was pretty uniform in its structure, but as we move forward, we see universities saying, why am I unique? How do I attract students? What is special about this that other universities don't have? And so we have this interesting curriculum, and we have these interesting courses, and we have an interesting structure, and let's try to attract students. And now, like, how do you transfer that to another university? And so I think each institution, while there used to be in academia a more consistent culture, not perfect, region by region, there are differences, whatever, but there was kind of a consistency of culture that was inherent to academia that I think has been widely lost to individuality. And I don't know that that's better or worse. Again, I'm not an expert, but it does create a microcosm for me that I can't really reason about what your school is like compared to mine.
I'll tell you this. So, have you heard a lot about the demographic cliff and all these types of issues in higher ed?
No.
Yeah. So it ties full circle into why we might see certain initiatives being pushed, special student support services, a lot of other things like that. So they're expecting it to start as early as next year, but in 2026, it's supposed to be this demographic cliff that occurs in higher education, which occurs as
the vernacular, but I haven't paid attention.
Effectively, but you'll see why I think some of this stuff ends up in the syllabus is effectively in 2008, there was a financial housing crash. Some folk, record unemployment, the Great Recession, and
anywhere.
Right. And a lot of families delayed starting families until they got another job. They were a little bit on more economic footing. And so the number of high school graduating seniors, fast forward 18 years from 2008 until.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you look at it, if you look at it from a market size pool, the market size in terms of available high school students that are going to be able to apply for colleges, and a lot of competition across the country, federal, private, public, is that the market of students is going like this, right? And so the universities are trying to fight for a smaller pie of available students that are going to be customers going into applying for their programs, right? So this creates a situation where students who come have to be retained, right? They have to be retained. And so there's a lot of effort on support services to make sure the student experience, these kinds of things are really important, and they're being pushed at a lot of universities because we can't afford to have students transfer. We want to make it more difficult for them to transfer to different places because we can't afford to lose the smaller number that we're having, because they've built an institution based off of a certain amount of revenue from tuition revenue that is now no longer there. And so you see a lot of places that are in huge operational deficits that they just can't right size. A lot of times it's A&S costs, administration costs, that they haven't adjusted, and sometimes it's the programmatic level that's stuck trying to figure out how they're going to cut budgets to make the right size for the revenue that the student tuition's bringing in. So there's a huge emphasis on retaining the students, making sure that you have a more diverse set of students that are coming to your university, that you have support services to keep them, to support them with counseling if they need that, tutoring, these kinds of things. And so I'm not saying that is the end-all, be-all, but I'm saying that I at least think that might contribute to some of the universities' desire to push forward some of these initiatives, is because they want to try and be the come here because we're not an ass school.
Yeah.
And we're a place that welcomes people, and we provide resources to support you. And once we get you here, right, then we want to make sure that you have a good experience, the college experience, that you'll get a job, these kind of things. So a lot of higher ed right now is getting ready to go through a little bit of a disruption significant disruption, where they're expecting market size to decrease about 15% next year. So a lot of places are thinking that enrollments are going to drop about 15% across the country, which is going to be, a lot of schools are going to close. Some of them might, or that's at least what some of the concerns are.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, I'm not in administration, and so I'm not working with the same data they are. So what their decisions are, somebody once asked. There was an interview, and it was Zuckerberg, and they asked Zuckerberg what he thought Elon Musk was doing with X, right, with Twitter X, right? And he's like, I'm not on the inside. I can't tell if what he's doing is good or bad because he's, privy to information that I don't have, and people are constantly criticizing my decisions, whatever his decisions with Facebook, but he's making decisions with all of this information that the outside world does not have. And so he's making educated decisions, and other people looking in are making uneducated decisions, ill-informed decisions. And so that's what he said about Elon Musk, is like he doesn't know if Elon Musk is making good decisions because Elon Musk is working with information that he doesn't have. And it's similar in which administration, I have criticisms for what administration is doing, but I also am not working with the same information that they are. And so they may be in panic mode and trying to salvage what may be unsalvageable with like Hail Mary policies. And from the outside looking in, without access to the data, it may look weird and foolish and rash to me, and maybe irresponsible at times or whatever, but there may be a wisdom in what they're doing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Based on what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, that's I spent a lot of time in the MBA in different courses that I take. I always try to do if they assign you a project in a class, I try to do something that's related to my field and stuff that's going on at the university that I can hopefully contribute and help with. And that's a big thing. That's kind of the issue in the nutshell, is that they've expanded. A lot of schools have expanded revenues to the point where there's bloated administrations, and then it costs a lot of money to support them. It's not actually dry. It's not. It's sort of Michael Porter from Harvard came out with the value chain model, which includes like inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, sales and marketing, and I can't think if there's one other one. But then there's like sort of the in order for all that to work, you have to have like HR and all these other things in order to like have a university or have a business. And so it goes through a lot of that. And I think that as faculty, we don't necessarily see where all the costs go and like why we need certain things. We just sort of know that some folks have really big salaries and we're working really hard, and it feels like we're not getting raises some years, if not, and it's, or they're, little things like that, and it's really
sometimes those are big things. Yeah, I have some big
huge frustrations about that. But they're trying to figure out, and I think they're trying to contend with the fact that there's costs of higher education as an industry is a really hard one because have you ever heard of the 5 forces model? That's another Michael Porter model. So in business, if you look at the forces that drive the competitive environment of an industry, there's the threat of new entrants, so new universities that come in. There's the bargaining power of buyers, so students and parents that want a good deal and value coming in. There's the bargaining power of suppliers, which is like Zoom technologies, classroom resources, Dell computers or Mac computers for supplying your stuff. So Blackboard services or Canva, whatever you may use as a service that you have to pay for. Then there's the threat of substitutes. So what other ways can you get the education? Could you go to trade school? Can you do an apprentice program that's cheaper? And then the last one would be industry rivalry, right? There's a lot of higher education is experiencing all of those forces simultaneously, right? Never before have people have really concerned themselves that there's intense competition because of the market size. So we're all competing for a smaller block of students. So that's one. There's the threat of new entrants is nobody is really low because who would want to enter that market, right? It's not really an attractive industry to create a new university. So that's sort of 1-to-1, 1 point each. So you have high competition. Bargaining power of buyers is actually good. So given that these families are coming into universities, they want to see the value. They want to see that the tuition price is congruent with what you're getting, job market, how much money you're going to make when you graduate, these kind of things. And they have a lot of schools that they might be able to get into that otherwise they maybe would be a second or a reach school. Now they can all of a sudden get into because of the smaller number of students that they're competing with in those schools. Suppliers are charging a lot. Zoom, Blackboard, they can increase because you need the technology to deliver it so they know that we're incumbent to them, right? So it's a situation where you have a lot of institutions that are struggling financially because they're not getting the same income, but their expenses are growing at a rate that is exceeding the ability to match them. And so it's creating a big challenge across the country, especially in the United States right now. A lot of colleges and universities are worried about going under or merging. You might hear a lot about mergings going on. That's common. So people in the business side of things, they're looking at programs. How many students did you enroll? How many students are enrolled in this class? Can we offer this class? What's the ROI of having Courtney teach epidemiology? How many students are enrolled in that class? And do we need to delay it a term so we have those students take it in a larger, right? So they're looking at a lot of that type of stuff in the administration right now. That's at least what I've gotten from a faculty member that's been able to look under the hood a little bit, is they're trying to figure out where the inefficiencies are.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where all of this goes. I mean, because nobody knows, right? Whether it's AI, whether it's medicine, whether it's academia, nobody knows where anything is going, and it's all changing.
Yeah.
And so the best we can do is sort of anticipate some months in advance and prepare.
Right.
And I feel like you and I are doing the best we can. I think
are.
you're probably doing a little bit better job of with the MBA and kind of looking into some of the background and administrative roles of these things.
Well, mostly in the event, and mostly in the. I want at some point to grow and be able to, maybe do department chair, eventually grow and become an assistant dean or a dean, or even my uncle, who died almost 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. He was a college president, and so I've sort of always been. He had a PhD in economics, so really. I sit there and I sort of like, maybe I'm meant for that, right? Growing at some point. And so we had a situation at our university where the dean, we had an interim dean for a couple of years and we were hiring. So I'm like, during this time where there's going to be a lot of transition, I'm going to use this time and go get this MBA degree because I feel like it would set me up for possibly the next step in doing, whether it's university administration or growing in, going into university leadership. I direct a program now. Or in the event that we all get replaced by the robots, that I might be able to pivot to a different career if I had to, like go do something, run my father's business or something. Having a plan B that if academia is disrupted the way it looks like it's being disrupted, or higher ed is disrupted in the way it might be disrupted, when we're out of a job for a year at least, because you have to go and, that's how long it takes for these cycles to go through. So anyway, I just wanted to be a little bit more diversified and also maybe do a small business or something as well. So it's tough in that way. But you've done some small business, and I want to be respectful of your time because we've been on this call for over 3 hours so far. Can you believe that? I want to be respectful, but you've been doing some personal business, and that is you've developed the crown and the cage of God. You want to tell everybody about it, and we'll make sure we put it in the show notes and talk a little bit about how you got into this, and if you want to talk a little bit about the book and anything at all about it, we can do that maybe with the last segment, I guess, before we.
Yeah. I started writing it when we were together at UConn. I started writing this thing, but it was slow. It was like little bits, little bits of a narrative, and then it just kept. I ended up like right when I started at Pacific, where I am now. There was this big gap where I basically made no work. I mean, I had notes. Technically, it's a little document called. One of them's like new writing or something, all in caps, and the other one's like delete temporary. I have these 2 Word docs that just have things I need to file elsewhere. Earlier, you talked about reading and making note cards about different topics. I have 10,000 different Word docs on my computer, but I have a couple of central ones where when I have an idea, I put it there. and then eventually, every couple of months, I'll go through those and I'll put them in the relevant Word docs where they belong, because I just, whatever idea I have. I mean, a lot of people do like voice memos, voice memo, but they have to do something with it later. And so there's a period where I was essentially voice memoing little ideas for the book. But some years back, I really ramped up my effort on it. And, it's part of a 5-book series that my first and sort of truest, as you've known, my kind of truest passion is literature. We had so many talks in the Yukon days about my favorite writers, favorite novels, and how it changes my worldview. Not just a plot, not like a Marvel movie that's like action and plot and what, like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in you begin a book and you learn compassion or empathy by occupying someone else's life and thoughts and how they see the world. You get to experience that and sort of broaden our ability to be compassionate, to sort of understand the cultures we live in. And so that's what I've always valued in books, and that's really what this one is a philosophical, somewhat scientific exploration in an invented world.
Gotcha. And was it what inspired you to write the book? Because I know we've talked about how I used to think it would be cool to see our name in print when we publish something, and then you start realizing, after you've had the first one, it's kind of cool. The first one's kind of cool, and then by the time you get to like the 4th or the 5th one, you're just like, oh, no big deal. Like, how many people are actually
my name was
reading
nowhere
this?
to found in that book.
Yeah,
Because the idea was I wanted the art to stand on its own. And so we have a bunch of publications in the natural sciences, and our names are on them, and it was kind of cool at first, and the novelty wears off. And then for the novel itself, I just wanted to create art that I was proud of, that had sort of, like picture of Dorian Gray imbued with my soul, where I can just put my whole heart into it. And I feel like I've done that. And there's more books to come. I've been working on the next installment a lot lately. As we get into Christmas break, my last final epidemiology is tomorrow, and then I can really transition into sort of full-time writing again. So I can get the next book in the series out. But yeah, so just putting my whole heart into it as an emotional, like what we talked about earlier with music and the paintings and arts, and how you should feel. If it resonates with you, you feel understood by the author. That's really the goal, is to create an emotionally true project. And so most of what happens in there and the characters and stuff are, very much nonfiction. It's set in an imaginary world, a secondary world, with a secondary bestiary, like it's populated by a bunch of sort of invented creatures. But the people and their interactions and their life experience and stuff are really drawn from real life. And just to make it, that's the imbuing it with my soul part.
Very cool. Very cool. So you have nonfiction pieces in there, and it's written as a fiction novel, but it's very much based on nonfiction.
Yeah, so it's very much an autobiography of a kind, of me, and there's several other people, lots of people that I draw from to create this sort of series of miniature autobiographies, to explore the human condition and our how we receive tragedy, how we receive triumph, what happens to our thoughts and behaviors in when challenged in those ways.
How did
triumph is a challenge too. Look at what happens to people with success. That's one of the hardest things to cope with, I think, is success.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess how did you have the drive to keep interleaving and taking time off? And have you ever got to the point where you were just like, yeah, I think I might just throw this thing in the trash because I've tried writing it,
Yeah. So there's a lot of times where I just like, why did I even start this thing? It's so much work. I don't know how many tens of thousands of hours, that I have, invested into this. And I have the first installment out, and there are a lot more installments to go. And like, this is going to be, I'm going to be like 90 years old. I'm still going to be working on that. I mean, like it's like my life investment. It's the most important work I've ever done. I consider it. Um, and but yeah, it sort of occupies so much of my life. But this is one of the things. Oh, again, I will not allow any AI sort of system to touch it. I don't want an AI fingerprint on it because this is the heart. I
Yeah.
mean, truly investing all of my emotion into it, and to have some Gene Simmons like calculated approach to success. That's not what this is, and so I have to go about it in the way that's true to me.
Gotcha.
Whether that delays releases, whether that is like hampers my success, the click rate, is irrelevant to me.
Gotcha. Well, where could folks find it?
So I have over 100 domain names that all go to the same place.
Okay.
But so on the back of the book,
Yeah.
that's Bonston right there, the character. Bonstan, Bonston. We'll both hold it up. And Bonston.com or BonstonBooks.com. My LLC is Bonston Books LLC. And it's a company that I've registered in Oregon. And so yeah, if you go to Bonston or BonstonBooks.com, you'll find it there. MyName.com, you can find it there, right? CourtneyJensen.com, it can be
Very
found
cool.
there. And lots of other domain. I'll leave those ones up to the viewers and readers to find what domain names go to it. But pretty much every character name, every location name, that domain goes to the same spot.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Courtney, this has been, awesome as always. I appreciate how we've, hard to believe. I think we've gone over close to 3.5 hours now, but it felt it felt like a breeze. I know.
Like, it feels incomplete without a
It does.
concluding hug.
I know. I give big bear hugs for folks that don't know, but it's always good to see you, and I appreciate the time. And if hope you and your family have a nice Merry Christmas. And is Marie home with you right now, or is she traveling?
She gets home on Friday. Yeah, she's
Gotcha.
in Arizona right now doing a lab.
So that'll be good. That'll be good. I'm sure to have her home, and you guys gonna go see some family. I'm sure.
This is the first year ever that I'm not doing Christmas in Oregon. So we're going to do Christmas here.
Cool.
And I've never not done it in Oregon. So, I mean, ever since Marie and I, even before we were married, when we were just dating, she'd go up to Oregon with me to do Christmas with my family. And so this year we're doing it here again for the first time. And my family, I know my brother is coming. My parents might come here. I'm not sure yet.
Cool. Well, hopefully they do.
Holidays, I hope you can set school commitments and
Yes.
all life stressors aside for a little bit, because we need that.
We do.
To have that separation of all of this tension and expectation that's just relentless, and that if we can just cut it off for a time, close the email accounts, and have a little bit of separation where we can actually engage in a relaxing and familial way. It's like,
That's important. You want to shut it down for a while, like I'm planning by Wednesday or Thursday of this week, once the final grades are ready to go in, to do that, just take just kind of basically I'm tempted to put an out of office responder on and just say,
yeah,
I'll be back on January 6th, and we'll see you then. But it's just because it's cognitively, when you wake up, even though you're off, technically, if you're not on break yet and people are emailing you, you're like, I kind of feel a responsibility to go, versus like people, this is the thing about looking at your job as a job versus a career. People who look at their career as a job and look at it like a corporation, like they would replace you in a heartbeat kind of mentality. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my job, and when I shut the email down, I close the door of my office. That's the end of the workday, and I don't even think about it until I come the next day and put the key back in. Some people look at their jobs like that, and unfortunately, professors, we picked unfortunately a career that's very much like a writer, a musician, right?
Where it follows you in every waking and sleeping moment of your life.
It totally does, to the point where you have to make sacrifice. Do I go train jiu-jitsu tonight, or do I sit down and catch up on some emails? You're constantly making these sacrifices and these adjustments to things. But anyway, I hope that you you get to spend some time. You deserve it, and then we look forward to for the next book that comes out in the series.
Thanks. And I think our last conversation went close to this long too. They're so nice. It's always so catch up.
It is.
So we will do it again soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.